Hi guys! This manhwa is called No Place for the Fake Princess. Enjoy watching.
For a girl named Philomel, everyone has a place where they truly belong, just as a farmer belongs to the land and a lord to their estate. And for an imperial princess like her, she was meant to live in the palace. But things turned out differently when someone arrived to claim her position. The people soon discovered that she was not the true princess, and they turned against her. They accused her of conspiring with her mother to deceive the emperor into becoming a fake princess, tarnishing the name of Belleroth. Along with this issue, more accusations piled up against her, painting a picture that justified her persecution in the eyes of society. Philomel tried to explain herself to her father, insisting that she had never pretended to be the imperial princess. She had always believed herself to be his real daughter. Although it was the truth for her, the other wrongdoings that she committed were already enough to condemn her. Yet the emperor did not bother to listen to her and ordered the guards to silence her immediately, and those who heard his command yelled in agreement. The longer Philomel remained in her situation, the more she realized that the affection and status she once enjoyed had never truly been hers. Summoning all the courage she could muster, she asked the emperor if he had ever regarded her as his daughter, even just a little. But the girl named Alincia, who showed as a real daughter and took her place, gently urged the emperor to leave, ensuring that no answer would be given. Before they departed, the emperor ordered the guards to proceed with her execution, referring to Philomel as nothing more than just a thing. In this case, the innocence of the little princess was overshadowed by her multiple other misdeeds, which resulted in her tragic fate. She was executed publicly, and no one spared a moment of pity for her. In the eyes of the world, the ending of the fake princess was that of a villainess. This is how Philomel's story was told in a book read by a young princess. They shared the same name, and the little princess, upon reading the story, felt that the character did not deserve such a cruel end, regardless of her wrongdoings. The tragic ending of the story made the young princess regret ever picking up that suspicious book she had found in the garden. The striking resemblance between herself and the character in the story, both bearing the same name, frustrated her. The story seemed to suggest that she, too, was a false princess, someone else's daughter. The thought of this angered her so much that she considered reporting it to her father and having the author punished for writing such a book titled Princess Alincia. However, she knew that her nanny would scold her if she saw it from her. But the thought of what happened to the book weighed on her mind. Her mother had beautiful blonde hair and green eyes, while her father had black hair and blue eyes. The book was about the story of someone who looked exactly like the Empress and the villainous Philomel, which made her wonder if she, too, was an imposter. She recalled the rumors that the emperor was planning to hand down the throne to someone from a collateral line instead of the imperial princess, who shared nothing in common with the late empress. They knew how much the emperor loved his late wife, and many thought he despised his daughter, believing her mother had passed away in giving birth to her. She also remembered how her father would always order the guards to drag her out of his room whenever she was asking his attention. Philomel tried to stop herself from comparing what was in her reality to the events in the book, convincing herself that the shared name was simply a coincidence. After all, the character in the story was depicted as a true villain. But the troubling similarities between the two stories made her suspect that perhaps the book had been written from the outside, who heard what was happening to her or what she did. Later on, she heard her nanny calling her name. She immediately hid the book before the old woman entered. When her nanny saw her, she inquired about her study. The little princess answered that she was studying properly. The old woman knew that there was something she was up to and told her to stop causing trouble and mature a bit. Because whenever she causes trouble, it is the servants who suffer the consequences. The emperor had ordered them to correct her behavior, and as a reward he promised to share a meal with her if she behaved. But Philomel knew that it was a lie. Ever since then, her father never acknowledged her, no matter how well she did in her studies. He never gave compliments, even when she aced her exams. Not even once did her father come to see her. Out of the blue, while her nanny was nagging, she asked if she was really nothing like her mother. The old woman answered that compared to her, the Empress was intelligent, mature, and exceptional. She even added that if she wanted to follow in the footsteps of her deceased mother, she would need to behave properly, especially on Foundation Day. The National Foundation Day is the most significant annual festival in the Empire of Belleroth, a land believed to have been blessed by the sun god. The date of the celebration is determined by the oracle, and it is customary for the imperial family and nobility to gather at the palace for a commemorative speech. However, the event that was supposed to be celebrated under the clear sky with bright sunlight turned out differently this year. The sky was filled with dark clouds and the rain poured down relentlessly. Philomel overheard his father talking with someone regarding the situation. This was the first time in history that the predictions of the scholars and mages had gone wrong. They were all confused as well because they had all confirmed that the weather would be fine for the celebration. Because of that, the emperor has no choice but to postpone the event. Hearing this troubled the princess deeply. The situation seemed eerily similar to a story she had read in a book. In that story, a character named Alincia had planned to attend the festival, but the sudden rain delayed the event. And just like in the book, Philomel had previously read about a strange event that followed the rain, the head priest's collapse, which seemed absurd and unbelievable. Even though she doubted the next thing to happen, she was still worried that things would really go according to the story. She thought that if the content of the books became the reality, then this means that this is not just a coincidence. In a state of panic, she rushed to her father and begged him to go ahead with the celebration, despite the bad weather. She suggested they could hold the commemorative speech indoors. But the emperor did not listen to her whining, dismissing her concerns. Those who witnessed the scene felt sorry for the princess, seeing how the emperor had just ignored his daughter. The rain continued to pour, and one of the maids gently urged Philomel to go inside before she caught a cold. A boy named Nassar, who had seen what had happened, considered approaching the princess. However, his father stopped him, reminding him that it was not the right time to involve himself in the imperial family's personal matters. Because of what happened, she ended up with her strict nanny's way of disciplining her. She endured the multiple hits from the thin cane the nanny used to punish her. The maids, concerned for her health, feared that she might fall ill after being out in the rain and enduring the punishment. The strict nanny left while nagging about how stubborn she was for not admitting her mistake. But for the princess, what hurts the most is her emotional pain than where she had been hit. As the old woman departed, the maids immediately went to her to give her some medicine. As they treated her, they gently chided her for not admitting her mistake to the nanny, which could have prevented further trouble for herself and the maids. Despite their concern, they reassured her that the nanny would eventually calm down. They also shared some good news. The festival had been postponed for a week, which they hoped would give the nanny enough time to cool down and allow the princess to attend the celebration. Philomel was surprised that the celebration day had been moved longer than she anticipated. So the maids explained to her that the priest collapsed on the carriage. Things had never been like this before, which made the servant conclude that the sun god was no longer blessing the empire anymore. For the other maid, her words sounded rude in front of the princess, so she reminded her about where they were. But for the princess, she stated that she understood if she had that kind of conclusion because of what happened. Philomel then asked them to leave. When she was already alone, she left wondering about the accuracy of the events that were written in the book. If the story she had read was coming true, could it really be just a coincidence? Perhaps it was more than a story, perhaps it was a prophecy. She realized the possibility that she was not a real daughter of Emperor Eustace, she was a fake princess. The next day, the nanny came to her room to wake her up because the emperor wanted to talk to her about the incident yesterday. But the princess could not go because she was sick. The nanny, assuming it was another excuse, scolded her for pretending to be sick out of fear of facing her father. But when the nanny touched the princess, she realized that Philomel indeed had a fever. Philomel dreamed of begging for love from her father. That is all she could only ask for, but it seemed that it was too much to ask. When she woke up, she wondered how long she had been sleeping. When she saw a plate of soup on her table, she remembered that it was her nanny who placed it there while reminding her to take her medicine and have a rest. But it did not end up on that simple reminder. The old woman still nags about her stubbornness over the mere festival. She also recalled when her nanny mentioned that her father already knew that she was sick. However, he is not the type to show concern for her. Princess Philomel completely understands and feels it. Having such a cold father made her fear for her life. Even in her dreams, he was the same distant figure, never speaking kindly to her. If things turned out as what was written in the book, the princess wondered, would her father execute her without hesitation? She tried to consider being a diligent girl and become the daughter that her father expected her to be. She wondered if the emperor would give her his mercy even though she was fake. After all, she had been his daughter for 9 years. Philomel wanted to confirm it and ask about it from her father. Because, aside from begging for love, she also wanted to live longer. Though she was still weak, she decided to leave her room and visit her father's office. But, dizzy from her illness, it felt like the path was longer than usual. On the way, she overheard voices from the servants' quarters. Curiosity led her to peek inside upon hearing them talking about her. They were complaining about the trouble she had caused, wondering why they should suffer for her mistakes. One of the servants tried to stop the conversation, worried someone might overhear, but the others were confident no one was around. They continued to complain about their wages being cut and being scolded by the nanny because of the princess. Philomel couldn't believe it. The people she had thought of as kind, her maids and her personal knight Martin, were speaking ill of her. One of the maids admitted to hating the princess, and they mocked her for lacking any divine powers, which were supposed to be a sign of royalty, leading them to hunch that she might only be a royalty from the outside. They reminisced about the embarrassing scene she caused in front of the noble the other day regarding the foundation day. The Abriden ducal family might have witnessed it, which they assumed would result in the cancellation of her engagement with the Duke of Abriden's son. Their conversation went up to recalling how the princess fed Duke Abriden's son a cake. Philomel could no longer bear the harshness of their words, so she left and rushed to her father while convincing herself to not let the words she heard affect her. At the emperor's office, Pollen was making an attempt to convince His Majesty to visit his sick daughter. But the emperor dismissed her illness as nothing more than a petty excuse. Even when Pollen mentioned that the imperial doctors had confirmed her sickness, the emperor didn't seem concerned. Pollen could not hold himself as he inquired his reason for being so cold to his remaining family. So, the emperor coldly answered that he never treated her as his daughter, referring to her as nothing more than just a thing. The man pressed on, asking if the emperor ever blamed the princess for the demise of Empress Isabella. The question triggered the emperor's anger. Pollen quickly bowed, apologizing, but the emperor only stated that while he once thought of her that way, he no longer felt anything about it. The emperor went on to explain that he never expected Philomel to replace his late wife. It would have been better if she had simply fulfilled her minimal duties as an heir. But even that had proved to be insignificant, and she even embarrassed herself in front of the nobles just yesterday. Pollen tried to defend Philomel, pointing out that she had worked hard despite being only 9 years old. But the emperor did not care. All he saw were the problems she had caused. During her age, he had fought fiercely for power, unlike Philomel, who was neither like his late wife nor like him. The man asked if he had not felt any affection for his daughter, which the emperor confirmed. The only thing that he expects from her is to live quietly like a lifeless rat, so he does not have to notice her at all. Princess Philomel returned to her room and cried after overhearing her father say that he had never seen her as his daughter. The little girl does not know what to do in order to live longer because no one is taking her side, and no one can help her. It took a while before her eyes became dry. The little princess dared to take out the book of prophecy. Desperately, she began reading, searching for any clue that might offer a way for her to live longer. According to the book, Philomel did not perish immediately after being exposed as a fake. This was because Alincia pitied her and appealed to the emperor. However, the girl could not hold back her jealousy, and in her desire for revenge, the fake princess eventually ended up imprisoned. Before her execution, she had managed to escape, but when she was caught a second time, her life came to an end. From that scene, the only hope she could think of was running away before Alincia appeared. However, there was one item that she needed in order to escape. She needs the Ring of Prominence, an item that was created for the emperor and heir of every generation in the Belleroth imperial family. The ring was imbued with the power of the sun god, a divine magic possessed only by the royal family. It granted the ability to perform various magical feats, including teleportation, a magic that allowed the user to travel to any place they had previously visited. However, Philomel had no divine powers, and she needed to receive the ring with her father's blessing already within it. And she knew that her father would not give it to her, so she needed to do something. But then she realized that she was still sick and wasn't strong enough to devise a plan. Moreover, being a good, obedient child wouldn't be enough, and she was certain many people despised her. Philomel perceived that this would be hard for her, but she still convinced herself that she could do it. That was the moment when she began to form a plan, fully aware that her life was at risk. That night, while the princess slept soundly, the emperor visited her room. The nanny asked if she should wake Philomel, but His Majesty instructed her not to, which made the old woman reluctantly leave. Emperor Eustace did not know what or why he was doing this. If not for Pollen, who was insisting on him visiting the child, he would not come to her room at this hour. However, he confirmed that the child was not lying about being sick. As he stood there, he heard Princess Philomel, still asleep, crying out for her father, pleading to spare her life. The sound of her voice startled him. She was dreaming, and in her dream, she was begging someone to let her live. Her words struck a chord within him, reminding him of his own past. The cries of his daughter echoed memories from his youth, when he too had been a child in fear for his life. He remembered how, in her younger years, the princess had begged him. He wondered if she had been just throwing a tantrum back then. Wasn't she living a happy life as an emperor's child? For her entire life, she had desperately sought his love and attention. From that moment that he was just staring at his whimpering sick daughter, the emperor realized that maybe he was wrong all along. The next day, Princess Philomel couldn't believe that His Majesty had given her a fruit from the world tree. The fruit, a rare and precious gift, was given to her for nothing more than a simple cold. Her nanny was curious if something had happened the previous day to cause this unexpected gesture. Philomel wasn't sure, so she asked the nanny if something had occurred that she wasn't aware of. She couldn't stop staring at the fruit. The world tree was located at the heart of the continent and bore fruit known for its exceptional healing properties. Only 12 of these fruits were ever given to the empire, and Philomel never expected her father would give one to her. However, she couldn't help but wonder if it was actually pollen, acting in the emperor's name, who had sent it. Philomel felt undeserving to have this kind of gift, but she still wanted to thank her father for giving it. Later on, she asked her nanny to take the fruit out with the medicine and requested to relay her gratitude to her father. Later on, the old woman informed her that the young master of Abrydon had requested to visit. He said he would come whenever the princess was well enough and asked when it would be convenient for her. Philomel hadn't expected this, but she agreed to see him that afternoon. In the afternoon, as Philomel was on her way to meet her guest, she overheard the Duke telling his son, Nassar, to fix his expression because he had been showing a grudgeful expression. His father understood his mood for not seeing his friends on that same day, but he made Nassar understand he still needed to fulfill his duty. A moment later, the princess entered and greeted her visitors. The two stopped talking and immediately stood up to greet her back, and immediately inquired how she had been feeling because they heard that she had been ill the previous day. Princess Philomel assured them that she was nearly fully recovered and thanked them for their concern. After a short while, the Duke left on an urgent matter, leaving his son with the princess. Before he left, he seemed to offer an encouraging glance toward Nassar, as if giving him approval. Nassar Abrydon is the mature and gentle person that she was engaged to. The son of the Duke asked the princess once again if she was already fine, worried that she might overexert herself. But the princess assured him that she was totally fine. Later on, Philomel asked to go to the picnic with him once she had regained her energy. The boy looked so surprised, but he still made it look like he agreed with her idea. When Philomel asked for a good place for them to have a picnic, he could not suggest a location, like he wanted to let the princess decide where she wanted to go. However, the weather was uncooperative, and it appeared they would not be able to go outside after all. Nassar agreed, and Philomel suggested having a snack indoors and making it feel like a picnic. Even though he was agreeing, the princess could tell that Nassar did not want to do anything with her. Philomel had an idea of having the pianist who had been famous in the rumors of high society play for them while having their picnic. The boy agreed, and Philomel noticed his polite responses but lacked any real enthusiasm. As the conversation continued, it became increasingly clear that Nassar was only going through the motions. Compared to the novel she read, Nassar would do everything for the person he loved, and certainly it was not her, it was Alicia. He never felt the same way as the princess. That realization made her cancel the plans they had just started to discuss. Philomel would have preferred for Nassar to act as if their conversation never happened. She even told him that there was no need for him to visit her so often, and apologized for wasting his time. From that moment on, he was free to spend time with his friends whenever he wished. Because of that, Nassar was worried that he might have hurt her feelings, so he immediately apologized for it. But the princess explained that they had spent so much time together that they hadn't made room for other friendships. Nassar understood what she meant, but he was still saddened by her words and let her leave quietly. For Philomel, she realized that while she could be considerate and kind to everyone, she could never give her heart to anyone. She had to protect emotion, especially if she ever planned to escape the palace. No one would hold her back when the time came for her to leave. Yet, despite everything, she couldn't help but wish that she could smile as genuinely as Nassar did. Philomel spent the following days focused on her studies. Her tutor was astonished at how quickly she read and absorbed new material, answering every question correctly. Her sudden improvement became the subject of rumors throughout the imperial palace. It was said that she attended her lessons as soon as she woke up and eagerly asked questions about anything she didn't understand. This change also affected her time spent with Nassar. Instead of playing, she preferred to spend their time focusing on their own things. Even when Nassar was with her, she spent most of her time reading or asking him questions about things she didn't know. She would praise his intelligence whenever he was answering her questions correctly. But for the son of the Duke, he was not used to this side of her, which made him wonder if the princess was still mad at him. And for some reason, the least attention that he got from her does not make him feel good. The maid was startled when she accidentally tripped and broke a teacup. She immediately apologized, but fear gripped her because the cup she had broken was a gift from Lord Abryden to Princess Philomel, and she worried that the princess would be furious and punish her. To her surprise, Princess Philomel didn't get angry. In fact, she was more concerned for the maid than the teacup. She calmly told the maid to clean it up before it stained the carpet and advised her to be careful not to cut herself. She even suggested the maid rest afterward. The maid did not expect the princess to react that way, which made her share that experience with the other servants quickly. They were surprised as well, which made them speculate that perhaps she had been severely punished for behaving like that. One of them believed that the princess's current behavior was only temporary and would soon return to her usual stubbornness, given how uptight and demanding she could be. Even so, having that behavior will at least make the entire palace quiet for now. As the days passed, Princess Philomel continued to impress everyone with her good behavior. She passed her exams, no longer complained when she fell, and had become less picky with her food. Everyone was taken aback by her transformation, and they began to wonder if she had truly matured. The nanny felt a deep sense of gratitude for the progress the princess had made. She believed her sacrifices and sincere efforts to teach Philomel had been worthwhile. She even mentioned that she would have regretted retiring early due to her back pain if she hadn't witnessed these changes. The maids praised her good work and perseverance, and the princess overheard their conversation. Little did they know, the princess was just doing it because she was desperate to live. Philomel did not want to pass by them, so she decided to take a different route. On her way, the maid saw her, who was just about to go to her room. The princess politely asked her why, so she informed her that the emperor wanted to have lunch with her. She did not expect it, but that was what really happened. On that day, Princess Philomel had lunch with her father. Instead of being happy, the princess doubted that the emperor only wanted to have a decent lunch with her, which made her suspect that there was something he was up to. Later on, she was taken aback when the emperor complimented her dedication to her studies as her teachers kept on praising her. Philomel humbly responded that she still had much more to learn and that her recent achievements were thanks to the excellent teachers His Majesty had provided. Upon hearing how the princess called him to his majestic position, the emperor also noticed that it seemed she now spoke with a maturity he hadn't heard in her before. He remarked on this, and Philomel explained that it was simply her responsibility as a member of the imperial family. The emperor agreed and praised her for her growing composure. The emperor then asked about her health, and Philomel thanked him for the medicine he had sent that had helped her feel better. Though their conversation seemed like a normal father-daughter exchange, Philomel remained cautious, knowing that the emperor's kindness was likely motivated by her recent accomplishments. For the emperor, it was a relief to see her well again, as it reminded him of her mother, who had also been fragile during her life. The emperor then offered to reward her for her efforts, asking if there was anything she wanted. Philomel had anticipated this moment, though it had come sooner than she expected. She knew the emperor for being clear about his rewards and punishments. This was not yet her time to ask for what she wanted, so she clarified that she just wanted his acknowledgement of her good works. It was a humble answer, but he believed it would be better for someone in her position to have some ambition. It seemed that the emperor wanted to insist on giving her a reward, so the princess thought of something that she could ask, carefully figuring out what would help her best in changing what was meant to happen in order for her to live longer. Philomel arrived at her room. The old nanny greeted her with a smile, though she seemed puzzled to see Count Laurel accompanying the princess. She inquired about his presence, and the count briefly explained that the emperor had ordered her to retire. However, they still acknowledged her years of service to the late empress and the princess. She does not understand what is happening, even how the emperor would generously reward her for her hard work. Later on, Princess Philomel expressed her gratitude for everything the nanny had done but gently told her that it was time for her to rest and step down from her duties. The nanny was reluctant to retire, as she had no plans to leave, so the count clarified that the princess had mentioned her long-standing back pain to the emperor, and he had decided that she needed to take a break and be replaced by a new, competent maid. The old woman was surprised to hear it and exclaimed that she was all right and asked for more consideration. But for the princess, she needs her out of the palace. Knowing the emperor, he is not the type to take back his order. Philomel overheard the concerned whispers of the maids when they learned that the nanny would no longer be working for the imperial family. They knew how hard she had worked, and she would be very disappointed to lose her job. While looking at them, the princess thought of sending them off as well. Sending the nanny away was the first step in changing the course of events, and Philomel began to feel a sense of hope that things were finally shifting. A few days later, the new maid arrived and greeted the princess she was going to serve. She was the head maid that served Elincia, Countess Dulles. The princess greeted her warmly, expressing hope that they would work well together. Having that person with her made Philomel feel that things might be even better because she knew that this person would be able to contribute to her plan. Countess Dulles could not believe that a person from the imperial palace would personally come to her to convince her to serve the princess. They believed that she was the most qualified person to do the duty. At first, the countess worried about handling the princess, who, according to rumors, was a picky and sensitive one. She was well aware of the negative rumors circulating around about the princess. However, regardless of her worries, she wanted to leave a good first impression on the princess. On their first meeting, the princess politely and warmly welcomed her. The rumors seemed to be fake, and because of that, she questioned in her mind the guts of the people who were talking badly about the princess. The princess showed interest in the countess's knowledge about the trending dress styles, so she invited her to take a look at her closet, which was full of beautiful dresses. Philomel was eager to show it to her, so when she agreed, she immediately grabbed her hands and led her to her room. While she was being pulled by the princess, the countess could not help but worry that she might be too mature for her age. She could also perceive the childlike side of hers too. When they got into her spacious closet, the princess immediately began showing her favorite dresses. However, the countess noticed how poorly the clothes were handled, disorganized and wrinkled. She believes that not even the maids of most noble families would make such a mistake like this. When Philomel inquired if she thought that her dresses were beautiful, she agreed to her. However, in her mind, upon her observation, she thought that the princess needed some new better maids. Thus, it happened as she thought it did. Not too long after, all of the imperial princess's maids were replaced. Because the countess requested an investigation, it revealed that the former maids had been embezzling money from the palace budget in addition to their negligence. The former servants tried to protest getting fired unexpectedly, but they knew that they could not do anything about it. Everyone involved was sentenced to severe punishment, including the nanny who was just recently sent off. The nanny tried to defend herself by claiming innocence regarding the thefts, but her assets were confiscated as punishment. She even begged the knights for mercy, but since it was an order from His Majesty, they showed no leniency. The rumors about the old nanny coming to the palace to protest that just resulted in her being beaten and kicked out reached the princess. The new maid was telling that information, as she even added that it would have been better if she witnessed how loud the old nanny cried after getting only one hit. When the countess overheard this, she reminded the maid that such words were inappropriate in front of the princess. Even though the dirty works of the old servants were revealed, the countess was certain, as she also seeing it to the expression of the princess that she didn't feel good about it, even though the princess claimed that it was just right for them to face their consequences. When she noticed the princess yawning, she immediately ordered the other maids to prepare her bed. The princess thanked her for that, but she said that it was her duty to serve her. As for the princess, things went according to her plan. Just like what she anticipated, Countess Dulles did the work for the deceitful servants to justifiably get rid of them. The countess is calm, dignified, and someone Elincia relies on. If things go according to the novel, she would not be able to have her on her side. Later that evening, the princess felt so tired, yet she thought it was still early to relax. Of all the things that happened on that day, she wished that the feeling of drawing herself away from her end continued. The next day, the countess brought the things Philomel asked, and she was curious about what those were for. So, the princess explained that she intended to brew tea for her father. According to a book she'd read, mountain herbs boiled in water could help with hangovers. The countess knew that mountain herbs had medicinal properties, but they had a foul smell and taste. However, knowing the princess was preparing it out of concern for His Majesty, she was sure the emperor would appreciate it. The countess also volunteered to prepare the teapots and cups, and the princess added that she would also need oil blotting sheets. As the princess prepared the tea, she struggled with the unpleasant smell. Though it was effective for hangovers, she knew it would be hard to drink it with that smell and taste. Fortunately, she had fruit juice from the world tree, which would help neutralize the bitter taste of the herbs. Mixing them together, she created a blend that was beneficial in improving health. While doing it, she felt sorry for Alincia because in the original story she was the one who invented this kind of tea. But still, Philomel thought that she would still be having a good life even if she stole the discovery of that kind of tea. But it seemed that things would work differently for the real princess. Despite that, Alincia is kind for giving something valuable to a certain knight, which makes the princess reflect on the differences between them. Later on, she finished making tea, and all she had to do was serve it to her father. Philomel went to the room of her father, and Pollen assisted her in waking up the emperor. The emperor seemed to be sick of hearing his voice first thing in the morning, and he yelled for Pollen to shut up. But he did not expect to find the princess in his room, greeting him while carrying a cup of tea. The emperor asked why she was in his room so early, and Philomel explained that she had brought the mountain herb tea in hopes of making him feel better. Pollen added that the princess had personally brewed it, emphasizing the effort she had put into it to make the emperor appreciate it more. The princess was explaining that the smell was different from its taste, but as she went closer to her father, she was halted by his awful smell. She could not stand how he reeks of alcohol, which made her wonder how much he drank last night. She even noticed the several empty bottles in the corner. When the emperor noticed her discomfort, he told her to stay away, and the princess was worried as she misunderstood that the emperor was mad again. But then the emperor still got the cup of tea from her and drank it. The emperor paused, surprised that the tea didn't taste as bad as he expected. Philomel was relieved that he liked it, and explained that she had mixed in fruit juice from the world tree to reduce the bitterness. Curious, the emperor asked where she had obtained the fruit. She told him it was from the fruit he had given her when she was sick. He claimed he had given it to her for her own use, but Philomel pointed out that she was no longer sick compared to him who always struggles with hangovers. Pollen interrupted their conversation, advising him to lessen his consumption of alcohol since, in a decade that he had been doing this, it might lead him to suffer from some health issues. But it seemed that the emperor was so sick of his voice that he would just tell him to shut up. Hearing that, Philomel realized that he had been drinking too much for a decade already, which means it started when her mother passed away and she was born. It would really make the emperor feel bad that his wife was gone and her daughter turned out to be fake. Later on, the emperor thanked her for the tea that reduced his headache. In return, he asked if there was something she wanted. Just like the princess anticipated, the emperor will reward her again. On that day, Philomel dressed up and waited for her father in the garden. Having a walk with her father is what she asked for. In this way, she was hoping to show him she could be a good heir. While waiting for the emperor, a kid suddenly yelled, reminding her that only imperial family members are allowed to go in that place. Philomel did not respond right away, as she was wondering who that kid could be. The kid thought that she was ignoring him for not answering, questioning if she did not know who he was. As the princess figured it out, he must be collateral since this place is only accessible to the members of the imperial family and the collateral relative. The boy was too loud. It seemed that he still did not realize that she was a member of the imperial family too. When the princess politely asked him to lower his voice, the boy yelled at him. When he didn't listen, she raised her own voice, telling him to shut up while stating his name, Liam Ilas. He was taken aback and offended at the rate at which she dared to talk to him, still not realizing that she was an imperial princess. They exchanged glares like they despised each other. Later on, Liam declared that he would report her to his mom. Moments later, his mother, Marchioness Sylvia Ilas, arrived with his brother, Logan. She asked if Liam had been hurt, and he immediately tried to report the princess. Philomel, surprised to see Marchioness Sylvia, greeted her, mentioning it had been a long time since they'd met. She was formerly Sylvia Belleroff, the half-sister of Eustace, the last remaining collateral relative in the empire. She had aligned with the current emperor early on, which allowed her to stay within the empire. The Marchioness has 2 sons, which are Logan and Liam. Since the current imperial princess had no divine power, her eldest son, Logan, was often seen as the likely candidate to become the next emperor. The reason why Liam hadn't recognized Philomel was because he was too young and had never met her before. The youngest son heard how her mother addressed the girl he was arguing with. He was surprised when she called her Philomel, which means she was the princess. He could not believe it since her mother used to say that she was unattractive. The Marchioness denied it while covering his mouth, as she just claimed that he must have misunderstood her. Later on, Logan formally apologized for the rudeness of his brother and then excused themselves to continue their family walk. While facing him, Philomel thought that he would be irrelevant when Alincia arrived. Suddenly, Liam requested his older brother to make the garden a playground once he became the emperor where he could play with his friends. Logan told him to stop talking nonsense, but his younger brother insisted he had heard Logan was already an emperor. While they were talking, the princess was thinking of letting what happened slide. She knew they might retaliate once her true identity was revealed, so it was better not to provoke them now. The family decided to leave. Only Logan bid goodbye to the princess. Philomel could not get a hold of how they treated an imperial princess like her, so she gathered her courage to call them again. The Marchioness looked at the princess and waited for the next thing she would say. With all her courage, she bravely reminded her that she must at least show proper greetings to her, as she sarcastically inquired of Marchioness Ilos if she had been treated disrespectfully by her collateral relatives when she was an imperial princess. Philomel, the imperial princess, demanded a proper greeting from Marchioness Silva. Unimpressed, the Marchioness sighed and responded sarcastically, but that was not enough for the young princess. The situation escalated when Philomel instructed her to kneel, a traditional form of respect shown to the heir to the throne. This made the noblewoman angry, but Philomel casually asked if she had said something wrong. After all, Marchioness Sylvia had once been an imperial princess herself, and since there was no empress, noble society had belonged to her. But since Philomel is the current princess, she refuses to tolerate being disrespected by anyone. Suddenly, Liam yelled, defending that his brother would inherit the throne. He repeated this insistently until they were interrupted by Emperor Eustace, who came to see what the commotion was about. Philomel was surprised to see her father, so she reported what Liam Ilos had been claiming his brother would ascend the throne. She asked if someone like him could really be in line for the throne instead of the imperial princess. Marchioness Sylvia immediately denied the accusation, claiming that Philomel had misunderstood. She tried to suggest that the princess was lying but softened her stance, asking the emperor not to punish her too harshly, as it was just the kind of thing children sometimes say. Hearing it made Philomel look at her father like her eyes were telling him that she did not lie. She began to worry that the emperor might not believe her and become disappointed in her. The Marchioness was just smirking with the hope that he would side with her and dismiss the princess's accusation about his son wanting the throne. Philomel began to tear up, insisting that she was telling the truth, but to her surprise, the emperor kneeled before her and told her that she was not a liar, and added that if she was a liar, then they are not different. What surprised them more was when she claimed that he had heard everything as well. Marchioness Sylvia's smirking expression turned into fear. Her eldest son, realizing the gravity of his words, immediately knelt and apologized profusely, claiming his actions deserved severe punishment. He also apologized on behalf of his younger brother, who had been too naive to understand the consequences of his words. Seeing Logan kneeling down, Liam innocently asked why he was acting that way when, in fact, he was just insisting that he had only repeated what others had said about his brother ascending the throne. Because of his persistence in insisting, his mother scolded him to stop and hit his head, which made him cry loudly. They were still denying the things that Liam had said, as they reasoned that it was only because of his over-imaginative mind. But for the emperor, he realized that he had not paid enough attention to those around him, allowing individuals like the Marchioness to plot treason so openly. His words brought fear to his half-sister, as he said that his reason for leaving him alone was because she was not worth his attention. Before anything worse could happen, he warned them to leave the place immediately. The three immediately bowed to the emperor and quickly departed. They were expelled once their divine abilities were sealed, and their names have since been removed from the imperial family. They were even shunned by others because they couldn't let go of their pride as royalty. Philomel was only informed about their fate at a later date. How her father threatened the family of his half-sister made him look scary. This made Philomel even more worried about herself if the emperor later found out that he was fake. While wondering, she did not notice that her father had already started walking. When the emperor called her attention, she immediately walked next to him. She began sharing things about her while they were together. For some reason, she felt like His Majesty now seemed to be in a better mood. They spent their day in that huge garden until before the sun left, when the emperor felt how the temperature began to cool. Out of nowhere, Philomel inquired if the emperor dislikes going on walks. Her father answered that after what happened, it appeared that it would be necessary for him to take more time outdoors to confront those who did not know their place. Because of that, the princess had the courage to ask if they could go on walks together again at some other time. His Majesty did now know how to answer, which made her think that he might refuse her request. But fortunately, her father agreed, which made her cheer like a child her age did whenever they got what they wanted. Overcome with joy, she felt like a child receiving a long-desired gift. Realizing she had overreacted, she quickly composed herself and formally thanked him. The emperor noticed it, which made him think that her daughter could act as she usually does instead of acting with so much formality. Philomel did not clearly hear it, but the emperor did not repeat his. He told her to simply do as she wished. From that moment, for some reason, Philomel felt that a warm wind blew past. The next morning, Philomel continued her new routine, bringing her father a cup of herbal tea to alleviate his hangover. It was another day that the emperor woke up and saw his daughter waiting. From that day on, the princess decided to always head to the emperor's bedroom with tea every morning that he overdrank. Fortunately, she has Count Pollen on her side, who also wants to fix the drinking habit of the emperor, the one whom she could easily gain information from and provide her with the access she needed to visit her father's chambers. However, the emperor keeps glaring at Pollen whenever they go there. But what was more important is that he never failed to empty his cup of tea. That morning, Philomel asked her father if they could go on a walk for that day. Pollen immediately informed him that he had no schedule for the whole afternoon, but the emperor halted her and claimed that his daughter was obviously asking him whenever it was his free day. But he still considered her simple request of going on a walk before doing his duties. They walked together in the garden again, so the servants left them alone and wished them to have a nice time. Having this alone time with his father is something that has accomplished his goal for that day. Later on, she brought up a conversation about how her writing teacher praised her for being the smartest among the students he taught. The emperor complimented her, but she added that her teacher might only say that because she was an imperial princess. Her father responded that they had a similar teacher when he was young, but he was not the type to praise a student. The princess intentionally brings up that topic. However, she does not expect her father to respond that way. While thinking how awkward it was, she accidentally tripped all of a sudden and injured her leg. Though the pain was sharp, Philomel tried to hide it, afraid of appearing weak in front of her father for crying over something like that. The emperor inquired if she was just fine, and while the tears were trying to come out, she forcefully smiled and assured her father that she could still walk. But to her surprise, His Majesty lifted her and told her to stay still. As they walked together, they could not figure out the most comfortable way of carrying a child like her. Princess Philomette tried to convince her father that he did not have to do it, but for the emperor, no other people could help her since only members of the family were allowed to enter that place. She insisted that carrying her would tire him, but it seemed to be an insult to him when she said that. So, the princess had no other choice but to endure the awkwardness. His Majesty suggested she sleep instead if she could not endure it, but the princess refused no matter how hard, uncomfortable, and awkward the situation was and thought that she felt warm because of the wind. The little girl later fell asleep in the arms of her father. The emperor returned to the palace while carrying his sleeping daughter. Countess Dels immediately attended them as she volunteered to carry the princess by herself, but the emperor politely refused. The countess then shared how the princess effortfully wakes up early to prepare her father's tea. She also shared what she knew about the late empress, who used to enjoy walking in the garden and looking at the flowers, which made her conclude that Philomel resembled her mother in how she worked hard every morning to go on walks with him. Upon reminiscing about Isabella, Emperor Eustace remembered how she used to look at the nearby scenery whenever they went for a walk together, while he was the one who could do nothing but gaze at her beauty. But as he spent more time with his daughter, he thought Philomel would be growing to resemble him more than her mother. As the days went by, Philomel already turned 10 years old. Just like when she started, she seemed to love reading. That day, she was at her study area with Nassar, who was now 11 years old. Since the day that he visited the princess with his father, Philomel has remained distant from him. For a long time, this made him inquire if the princess disliked him. Philomel might be wondering why he was asking that. She answered that she did not. He then asked if she overheard his conversation with his father back then, and until then, it felt like she no longer enjoyed spending time with him. After hearing that, Philomel did not know how to respond. Suddenly, Nassar kneeled down, asking for her forgiveness. The princess urged him to stand up, but he refused and declared that he would beg for her forgiveness until she was satisfied. Philomel explained that he did not have to apologize for something that she just accidentally heard and assured him that she was not insulted by it. But for the son of the Duke, he claimed that having that mindset that he might have hurt her is the problem. With that statement, Philomel did not know how to deal with this awkwardness. The day she first met Nassar was still vivid in her memory. She had run with incredible speed just to see him, eager to discover what kind of person he was. The moment their eyes met, she fell in love with him. Nassar, too, was happy and pleased to meet her. According to the stories, his fiancée was even more of the person she had hoped for. He also had a remarkably pleasant voice. She was overjoyed to meet him, and from that moment on, she eagerly looked forward to seeing him again. Though Nassar was invited to stay a little longer, he knew his father would be upset if he arrived late for class. Still, he was allowed to remain for a while. She appreciated his gentleness, something she had never received from her parents. Every time he showed her sympathy, she felt not as the imperial princess, but as Philomel Belleroff. She was pleased that this boy would become her fiancé, unaware that their connection and her emotions were all an illusion. It wasn't Nassar's fault, so she told him to rise. There was no way for him to control his feelings, nor any way to stop them. She couldn't be angry with him for something beyond his control. Nassar believed that his feelings were his own responsibility, so it was his fault to have that kind of mindset. She wondered just how harshly Duke Abryden had reprimanded him to make him feel that way. When she thought about it, she heard some rumors that Duke Abryden was known to be very strict when it came to Nassar's education. As someone who had studied to become a successor herself, she was beginning to understand how difficult it must have been for him. Nassar bowed deeply and knelt, asking her to let him know if there was anything about him she didn't like. He promised to change it, explaining that he had been born to serve Her Highness. She found herself questioning why he had been born to care for her when he was his own person with his own life to live. Yet, it seemed as though his father had made it clear that he was to fulfill his responsibilities with that very sense of devotion in mind. Philomel felt a sense of disappointment with what Duke Abryden had taught his son so far. However, she also worried that Nassar might come to despise her if he ever learned she wasn't truly an imperial princess. She instructed Nassar to sit down and repeat what she was about to say. She reminded him that he was a valuable person. At first, he hesitated, but she encouraged him to give it a try. Finally, he agreed. She emphasized that he was not born for anyone else's benefit and that, ultimately, he should live his life as he pleased. Nassar felt a jolt of surprise at her words, which struck him as though she had peered straight into his inner thoughts. He repeated her words. She encouraged him to internalize this mindset. Nassar thanked her for looking after him, while the princess reminded him that he didn't need to worry about her. She advised him not to dwell on such matters. She had always known that one day Nassar would cross paths with Alincia. Yet, aware it wouldn't happen with her by his side, she silently wished for him to embrace his own path and live a life true to himself. After all, he had been her first love. Then, she thought that maybe they could try again, start over, perhaps. That afternoon felt different. More relaxed because Nassar's presence felt more comfortable than before. During their meal, she asked him what food he enjoyed. Nassar quickly answered that his favorite was beef steak. Philomel agreed, finding it delicious herself. She then asked if Nassar had a dream that his father hadn't decided for him. He seemed a little embarrassed to respond, but admitted that he aspired to be a hero. She was glad to hear this, it suited him well. As they talked, Philomel saw more of Nassar as a person. Just Nassar, not the heir to the Abryden household or the male protagonist of the story. She appreciated this new understanding of him. She felt that, perhaps, they could continue spending time like this. But she also wondered if she could have been more honest with him if she had felt this comfortable sooner. Later that evening, when it was time for Nassar to leave, Philomel noticed his solemn expression as he said farewell. She asked if he had anything on his mind. Seeing his hesitation, she urged him to disregard anything his father might say that contradicted their conversation. Nassar nodded in agreement. If his father ever said something that would trouble him, Philomel wanted Nassar to let her know. She assured him that she would reprimand his father, and she meant it. He couldn't help but laugh at her, but he still responded that he would let her handle it when the time came. Seeing him with a bright smile before leaving made the princess happy and thought that she would see him again soon. After Nassar left, Philomel retreated to her room. She stood by the fireplace, holding a book in front of the blaze. Having memorized its contents thoroughly, she believed nothing negative could happen. Confident that the book was of no further use, she threw it into the fire. She watched the book consumed by flames, convinced it was over now that she had carefully concealed every detail it contained, like a hidden password. To her astonishment, the book had not burned. Instead, it had mysteriously returned to its original state. She stared, unable to understand what she had just seen. The events forced the princess to seek out a mage, driven by the need to uncover whatever she could about the mysterious book. Court mage Humphrey offered Princess Philomel tea and asked what had piqued her interest. She inquired if he knew everything about magic, as that was what she was curious about. Though he was confident that he was the most knowledgeable person in the royal palace's magic research lab, he admitted that he couldn't claim to be an expert in every field. He also mentioned that he had previously worked at the Mage Tower. Philomel was amazed to hear that. From what she had heard, certain forms of magic were known to exist. He asked her what specific kind of magic it was, and she mentioned certain instances, which he noted had been exaggerated by the writers. Humphrey answered seriously, but Princess Philomel had another question she was more eager to ask him. Upon hearing his response, she reflected that her examples would likely remain impossible in the future as well. The thought crossed her mind that having a book capable of revealing the future would be helpful in moments like that. He asked if she was referring to a book of prophecy. When she heard that question, she was happy as he took her bait. She explained that she was intrigued by it because she had only ever heard of such books in rumors, and she wondered if they actually existed in reality. The mage responded ambiguously, saying that while he could claim they were real, he could also assert they were not. Curious, Philomel pressed him, asking what he meant by that. A book of prophecy, he explained, would be a book that records future events accurately. However, such books only existed in rumors, and none had ever been discovered. He went on to say that the existence of such a book was both practically and theoretically impossible. Philomel was still confused, so the mage continued, explaining that a future foreseen by a wizard was only one possible scenario among countless others. The same applied to predictions from the high priest. Even the archpriest's prophecies were inaccurate about 30% of the time. He stressed that prophecies in general could be right or wrong depending on who made them. He was careful to clarify that this didn't mean he was questioning God's existence. With a puzzled expression, Philomel asked if he was trying to say that a book of prophecy didn't exist, and he answered yes. This left Philomel wondering what the book she had read was, especially if there was no concrete evidence of any prophecy books existing. Still unsatisfied, she questioned whether an exceptional mage could use foresight magic to achieve such a feat. The mage was about to dismiss the idea, insisting that it was impossible regardless of the mage's skill, but he froze when the princess mentioned the master of the magic tower as an example. Humphrey hesitated, wanting to confirm if he had heard correctly. Philomel assured him he had and went further, asking what kind of person the master of the magic tower truly was. Trying to escape the conversation, the mage pretended to have a stomach ache and excused himself. However, Philomel noticed his behavior seemed like an act, and he was simply ignoring her questions. Feeling frustrated and hopeless, Philomel realized that none of her questions had been answered, particularly about the Mage Tower's master. No matter how many other court mages she questioned, they all reacted in the same uneasy manner. She decided to open the book again and turn to a page that mentioned the Sage of the North and the Master of the Mage Tower. As she read, she discovered something shocking. Her biological father was Archmage Lugwin. The Book of Prophecy revealed that she had fled to the Mage Tower after her initial escape, and it was the Master of the Mage Tower, her real father, who had helped her instead of casting her out. However, when the princess began to misuse her father's power, Master Lugwin stopped protecting her. Consequently, she faced the costs of her actions and ultimately met her end. The passage was written from Alincia's perspective, and Philomel felt as though she had no choice but to meet the master of the Mage Tower in person. As she lay in bed, she reflected on the book's account of her father's attempts to protect her. Perhaps she thought he had at least loved her. She wondered again how the book had come into her possession in the castle garden, and whether meeting the master of the Mage Tower was the right decision. 2 years later, Philomel noticed a change in His Majesty's habits. He had reduced his alcohol intake and was now drinking tea. She felt happy to see this and asked him if he had a lot of work. He replied that there wasn't much, but from the look of the documents on the table, she could tell otherwise. Curious, she asked what type of paperwork he was handling. He began explaining that it was connected to the upcoming National Foundation Day, but abruptly stopped, remembering the argument they had about it before. Philomel, awkwardly, mentioned that she was looking forward to the events of National Foundation Day, though the subject made her uneasy. From his demeanor, she could tell that His Majesty seemed anxious. She asked if fireworks would be part of the celebrations, as she had enjoyed them the previous year. He answered that they weren't scheduled yet, but he would make sure they were added to the event. The princess remarked that there was no need to make such a fuss, but His Majesty countered, stating it was a boring and uninteresting day. National Foundation Day, she acknowledged, was an important occasion. On that day, His Majesty always gave a speech in remembrance, and it was one of the Empire's 3 major anniversaries. Of all the events, Philomel liked His Majesty's address most, as it always ended swiftly. She said cheerfully that she hoped to give a commemorative speech when she became the next empress, though she only said it because it was the expected response for an heir. But to her surprise, His Majesty asked if she would like to try giving a speech this year. It was not required by law that the emperor give the speech. In the past, a predecessor had given one with a crown prince. Although unsure of her ability to fulfill such an important duty, His Majesty reassured her it wasn't a big deal. She could simply go out and say a single sentence, or perhaps she was implying she couldn't do it. Philomel, determined, told him she wanted to give the speech. At that moment, she reminded herself not to try too hard to impress His Majesty, but to keep her actions moderate and balanced. Later that day, Princess Philomel was diligently composing her speech. With a positive and determined mindset, she was set on delivering the task entrusted to her by His Majesty. She saw this as an opportunity to prove herself, although she knew that while she would no longer be looked down upon within the palace, people outside still saw her as an immature princess. If the event went well and her speech was a success, she was determined to use it as leverage to ask the emperor for something important. To make a lasting impression, she had to craft the perfect speech, one that would leave everyone stunned. A few days later, on the anniversary day, Princess Philomel felt a pang of nervousness. There were far more people in attendance than she had anticipated. Suddenly, Prince Nassar, noticing her unease, asked if she was feeling all right. She admitted that she was a little anxious but reassured him that it was nothing to worry about. Nassar, holding a bouquet of flowers behind his back, hesitated, trying to think of something that would cheer her up. But before he could speak, a guard approached, informing her that it was time to go. Though she hadn't heard what Nassar would say, she thanked him for his concern. He, in turn, was confident that she would give a good speech. Philomel took a deep breath as she approached the stage, trying to calm herself. The spotlight was now on her. This was her chance to restore her reputation and present her reformed look as the heir. But as she walked there, she noticed some guests observing her with curiosity, noting her nervousness. When she began her speech, she immediately realized that her voice wasn't being amplified. Panicking, she couldn't leave the stage to check if the speaker was malfunctioning. Nassar, noticing the same issue, quickly asked the guard whether there were any other loudspeakers available. The guard, however, informed him that the one on stage had been specially designed for the princess, so they had no alternative. Guests began to murmur, wondering why she wasn't speaking. At that moment, Philomel was frozen in place, as it seemed like everything was on the verge of falling apart. In a surprising turn of events, His Majesty stepped forward and lifted her into his arms, leaving everyone stunned. As she struggled to make sense of his actions, her father calmly explained that she could use his loudspeaker for her speech. Philomel felt embarrassed. She wasn't a child anymore, yet there she was, being carried like one in front of the crowd. She couldn't help but feel that His Majesty had grown too accustomed to doing that for her. Her father patiently waited for her to speak. If she didn't, he said, he would bring her down. But Philomel adamantly said that she could do it, so she began her speech. She addressed the people of the Belleroth Empire, expressing her gratitude for their presence at the event. As she spoke, the crowd watched in astonishment, seeing a princess entirely different from the one described in the rumors. This led them to dismiss the gossip about the heirs changing as baseless nonsense. The event was a success, and beautiful fireworks lit the sky afterward. Noticing that Princess Philomel always spent National Foundation Day with Nassar, His Majesty asked her if it was okay to spend it with him this time. She politely responded that she'd like to have a meal with him and didn't have any plans with Nassar that day. The princess then asked her father how her speech had gone. His Majesty praised her, telling her she had done an excellent job. This pleased Philomel, and she began to ask for a reward for her hard work. To his surprise, the princess asked for the Ring of Prominence. His Majesty, however, told her it was too early for her to have it. He explained that she wasn't ready yet. Philomel argued that she would be cautious with the ring and could use it effectively. But His Majesty remained firm, telling her that the ring was a heavy burden for someone as young as her. She would need to wait until she was older to bear its weight. Her frustration grew. She couldn't wait that long. Perhaps by the time she was ready, Elincia would have already shown up to claim her place. His Majesty, seeing her intense desire for the ring, asked her once more why it was so important to her. Philomel, without hesitation, replied that the Ring of Prominence was a symbol of her legitimacy as the rightful heir to the throne. Again, His Majesty reassured her that when she reached adulthood, the ring would be hers. In the meantime, he offered her anything else she wanted. But Philomel stubbornly refused, insisting there was nothing else she needed. Emotions running high, she apologized to His Majesty for her outburst. She realized that she had let her emotions get the best of her. For a moment, she had lost control despite her efforts to gain His Majesty's trust. Now, she found it difficult to even look him in the eye. Her plan to escape her current life seemed impossible without the ring of prominence. Later that night, as she lay in bed, her mind raced with troubling thoughts. She was now uncertain about what to do next. If she couldn't obtain the ring in time, her plans would have to change. Yet, despite everything, she couldn't summon the motivation to do anything about it that night. A while later, one of her attendants came to her with news. His Majesty was calling for her as he had received precious tea leaves from Alida. Philomel, exhausted and frustrated, ordered the attendant to tell him she wasn't feeling well. However, she added that His Majesty would likely come to her room himself if she couldn't come. Suddenly, she wondered if their previous conversation had been so important that His Majesty needed to speak with her again. She felt something off, so she thought if there was something more going on. She didn't want to meet the Emperor while she was in such a fragile state of mind. She instructed the aide to tell him that she was already asleep if he arrived. The princess was simply not in the mood to face His Majesty. Exhausted beyond measure, she longed to rest but lacked the strength to even get into bed. The aide, though curious, obeyed the princess's wishes and told her to get some rest. A moment later, she heard a noise and assumed it was her aide returning to try and persuade her again, but she resolved not to give in. But to her surprise, she heard His Majesty's voice calling her name, assuming she was still awake and simply pretending to sleep. Princess Philomel remained completely still, not bothering to move an inch as he spoke to her. His voice continued, asking if she didn't even wish to glance at him. Despite her silence, His Majesty persisted, continuing to express his confusion. He informed her that he didn't understand why she wanted the ring so much. After all, she was his heir even without it. Philomel lay still, wondering if he was angry, unsure whether she should respond or remain quiet. He went on, saying that if she truly wants the ring when she turns 15 in 3 years, he will give it to her then. The words struck Philomel with shock, and before she even realized it, she was already sitting and facing her father. The moment felt surreal. His Majesty mentioned that by that time her body would likely be able to handle it, but still advised caution in using it. When the princess heard that, she was thrilled beyond words. She was unable to contain her excitement. Without thinking, she hugged him tightly. After a brief pause, she pulled back slightly after realizing what she had done. The Emperor asked if she was that happy, and Philomel answered that she was. She calculated that, with 3 years remaining, Elincia's appearance was still far off, giving her time to execute her plan. While she was absorbed in her thoughts and future strategies, His Majesty found satisfaction simply in her presence. After 3 years, the aide called for her attention, asking if she was ready because His Majesty was already waiting for her, and told her that there were only a few hours left until her debutante. As the aide saw Princess Philomel, she couldn't hide her reaction. She told her that she was so beautiful. But she was worried that she dressed too much. The aide confidently that she was dressing too plainly all the time and that she dressed beautifully that day. She informed Princess Philomel that her debutante was being held earlier than usual, ahead of many other ladies. Despite this, she added, she appeared as dignified and poised as any young lady of the court. Philomel thanked her for her kind words, but inwardly, she couldn't shake her worry. She was still so young and unsure. After all, debutante ladies were traditionally expected to be 16, yet here she was. The absence of Marchioness Ilos, who had once been the queen of high society, weighed heavily on the princess's mind. Since she was gone, someone had to step in and take the lead in the social world. The people were looking to the imperial family to fill that void, and she couldn't help but worry if she would be able to play her part. She gently informed Princess Philomel that the dress she would wear for her debut might not align with her personal taste, but she advised her to bear with it, just for this one important day. The princess then proceeded to the celebration, unwilling to keep His Majesty waiting any longer. As the celebration had yet to begin, Prince Nassar lingered in a quiet corner of the palace, lost in thought. 2 ladies, noticing him, approached with a flurry of compliments. One of them said that he had grown even more handsome with each passing day, with her voice filled with admiration. Nassar smiled, a little flustered by their words. The second lady added he was so humble too. No wonder that the son of the O'Brien family has become so well known. They were clearly impressed, added with a smile. With the qualities of the prince, he'd make such a perfect fiancé. The princess certainly won't have anything to worry about. The two ladies made an assumption about Prince Nassar's role that he would be the princess's first dance partner. It's a well-known tradition that a lady's first dance partner at her debut is considered her match. And explained to him that it's something everyone in the social world believes. Before Nassar could respond, their attention was drawn to the arrival of the Emperor and Princess Philomel. As they entered the hall, the crowd greeted them with full respect. The princess quickly spotted Nassar across the room, who was staring at her. Turning to the Emperor, she told him she would be having her first dance with Lord O'Brien. When His Majesty heard that, he was somewhat displeased and didn't like the idea. Then he replied that the belief that a first dance partner signifies a match is just a myth. Princess Philomel nodded, reassuring him to not worry. But inwardly, she couldn't help but wonder what had prompted his advice. Still, she knew she shouldn't overthink it. She just had to do what was expected of her, and everything would be fine. As Princess Philomel walked across the ballroom, the guests couldn't help but notice her beauty. At just 14, her elegance and grace were impressive, with some marveling at how poised she appeared for her age. Alongside her, the Duke's son Nassar had grown into a handsome young man. Many in the crowd whispered that they made a perfect match, perhaps even noting that His Majesty seemed to approve of their pairing. However, their thoughts shifted when they observed His Majesty's expression. His face was not one of approval, but rather one of clear discontent. Princess Philomel approached her fiancé, Prince Nassar. She reached out and asked softly if he would dance with her. The Duke's son, with his face flushed, unsure of how to respond, became speechless for a moment. As the princess extended her hand amidst the celebration, inviting him to dance, she noticed his silence, so she asked if he was feeling unwell. He replied that he was simply lost in thought and unable to react in the moment. Concerned, she inquired whether he had pushed himself too hard in his swordsmanship class the day before or if his teacher was particularly demanding. He assured her that he was fine and had rested well. After a brief pause, Nassar hesitated, wondering if she would mind him being the one to ask her to dance. He extended his hand to her, explaining that he had wanted to approach her first but feared he might be rushing things. She smiled in return, clearly pleased that Nassar had finally asked. While they were dancing, the princess felt the warmth of his hand through his gloves, a subtle yet intimate connection. She had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. It was at that moment that it became clear, Nassar was no longer a child. The princess complimented him for being good at everything, even leading her with the dance. His face radiated pure joy, clearly reflecting how happy he was. He even confided in her, explaining that he had put in so much effort to prepare for that day, so he told her to trust him with their dance, which surprised the princess. As they danced, she knew she couldn't show any weakness at that moment. She had to continue playing the role of Alicia, keeping up the facade until the time came for her to leave. After the success of the grand debutante, Princess Philomel found herself busier than ever. In addition to her usual responsibilities as the heir, including her lessons, she also took on the task of gathering information from the social world, news, gossip, and diplomatic rumors, to report back to the emperor. The year arrived when she turned 15, and for the first time she laid eyes on the ring of prominence. She was amazed. True to His Majesty's promise, he presented the ring to the princess. From her reaction, it was clear that she was in disbelief upon seeing it. She asked once more if it was truly the ring of prominence. His Majesty confirmed, reassuring her that yes, it was the very ring, the one she had longed for over the years. As she gazed at it, Princess Philomel couldn't help but remember how childish she had once been in her desperate efforts to obtain it. He informed her that he had infused the ring with divine powers, given that she had none yet, and reminded the princess to keep her promise not to be careless while using it. As His Majesty placed the ring on her finger, he reassured her, telling her not to worry about anything anymore. He affirmed that she was and would always be his heir. On that day, Princess Philomel finally held what she had long desired in her hands. Yet, she couldn't set her escape plan into motion so far. Later that night, Princess Philomel's face fell with disappointment. According to the book, she had hoped that once she possessed the ring, she would be able to locate Alicia. As she pondered Alicia's whereabouts, she recalled something she had read. The book mentioned that she frequented Udina Lake. Perhaps, she thought, she might be nearby. But she wondered how she could pinpoint the exact location given the many villages in that area. After visiting the lake a few times, everyone began to believe that the princess had developed a fondness for the place, unaware that her true purpose was to see if Alincia would appear. Now, she began to consider disappearing before it was too late. According to the book, even if she let things unfold on their own, the truth would eventually be revealed, that Alincia was the true princess and His Majesty would chase after her before the original arrived. As she lay on her bed, her thoughts turned to her biological mother, the one who had swapped her with Alincia. She wondered if, consumed by guilt, her mother might eventually bring the true princess to the palace where she truly belonged. By revealing the truth, she might put her own life in danger. On the other hand, she couldn't help but wonder if her mother ever thought about her too. With everything weighing on her mind, she shouldn't be overburdening herself with stress. Instead, she should focus on the tasks at hand and the things she needs to accomplish. As the book states, her mission was clear: find Alincia and bring her to His Majesty. If she succeeded, there was a strong chance the Emperor would no longer come after her. She needs to do this for herself, not for anyone else. Her primary goal from the beginning has always been survival, and that isn't selfish at all. Later, on the day of the socialite party, 3 elegant ladies approached Princess Philomel. They greeted her with respect and honor. Upon recognizing one of them, Lady Luzin, the princess politely inquired if Countess Luzin had been feeling well recently. Lady Luzin responded graciously, thanking the princess for her assistance in calling the doctor. Philomel humbly said that it was nothing since all she did was to provide a connection between them. Similarly, the other ladies expressed how honored they were to have received help from the princess. They all offered their heartfelt thanks for her kindness. From afar, Nassar was observing while he was looking at the ladies having a conversation. But to his surprise, Kenny, his friend, tapped his back as he was saying that he was looking for him. Kenny wondered who Nassar was staring at so intently at the party. When he realized it was likely Princess Philomel, he mentioned that he had gotten a good look at her during her debut party, but it seemed Nassar wanted to see more. He explained that it wasn't as he thought. Kenny gave him another playful tap on the back, clearly not believing him. Noticing how happy Nassar seemed just watching the princess, he teasingly asked if he liked her that much. The young lord paused for a moment before replying that Kenny had also danced with the princess. He quickly countered, saying all she had done was accept his hand for a dance. Nassar, however, was still her first dance partner, and of course because he was her fiancé. While his friend was confirming if it was really the reason, the young lord noticed something below. It was Princess Philomel who spotted them and waved her hand at Nassar. Kenny continued teasing his friend, jokingly asking what he looked like at that moment. He playfully suggested that Nassar might be feeling jealous because the princess had danced with someone else. However, Kenny assured him not to worry, reminding him that he was the lucky man destined to marry Her Highness. But the young lord was not fully convinced with that fact alone. And by that moment, their conversation was interrupted by the Emperor's arrival. The Emperor arrived at the socialite party, and as he entered the room, everyone paid their respects to him. The princess approached His Majesty and asked if he had finished his work. He quickly replied with a yes and invited her to leave, even though the party was not yet over. She excused herself from the lovely ladies and gracefully obeyed her father's request to depart. Nassar noticed that the princess was leaving the party with the Emperor and decided it was time for him to go as well. Kenny was confused as to why he wanted to leave when the party had only just started. Without hesitation, Nassar replied that he no longer had a reason to stay. As the Emperor and Princess were riding in their carriage and on their way home, she asked him if he still wanted to hear any report since, as per her, there wasn't anything special going on. But he insisted and liked to hear it. She began her report, starting with Countess Luzin. The princess was pleased to inform him that the lady had improved significantly after taking the medicine from Alida, which was known to be effective. She also informed him about an emerging epidemic in the southern part of the empire, suggesting that medicine be sent there to help contain it. Upon hearing this, the Emperor immediately stated that he would issue an order to the relevant authorities to prevent the disease's spread. She then proceeded with Marquis Land, who recently had a late-born daughter, and she also heard about Count Versailles building in-law relations with a foreign ambassador. He was impressed with how well the princess had carried out her duties, and he praised her for it. She was overjoyed by his compliment and thanked him warmly. After delivering her report, the princess felt that she was growing more accustomed to her role in society. She couldn't help but wonder if that would be enough for her to be truly accepted as the Emperor's daughter. The Emperor reminded her that her birthday was approaching and asked if there was anything she wanted as a gift. Speechless, she wondered how His Majesty knew her birthday was so near. She thought perhaps their aide had mentioned it to him. After a moment, she realized this might be a good opportunity to ask for something she had been wanting. She told him that the ring of prominence His Majesty had given her last year was more than enough. However, that was not the response he had wanted to hear. Eventually, she shared her true wish with him. Instead of asking for a gift, she requested a favor, the secondary palace in Utena. The emperor stopped and wondered why she wanted the palace in Utena. Afterward, the emperor decided to tell her that he would give her the secondary palace as a gift for her upcoming birthday since she always visits that frequently. However, she quickly clarified that this was not what she had meant. She explained that she wanted to spend the spring at the Utena Palace with His Majesty, hoping to witness once more the beautiful scenery she had seen before. While she said it might be difficult for the emperor to accompany her, she still hoped he would grant her request. The truth was that the princess had finally discovered where the true daughter was. The emperor never mentioned that it would be difficult for him, so he told her that they would fulfill her wish for her birthday. They would go to the Utena Palace together. Princess Philomel was overjoyed that he granted it. But then, he recalled that there would be a political meeting on the same day as her birthday, and he began to wonder how it would work. She suggested that they could go after the meeting. But at the back of her mind, she remembered that that day was also the anniversary of the Empress's death, which might make it difficult for His Majesty to attend. He said that if they were going after the meeting, that would be after the princess's birthday. The princess knew that, but she informed him that it was okay since national matters were more important. His Majesty decided that the political meeting would be held at the secondary palace, but she was confused about the ambassadors attending. So he stated that they could also come with him, and after the meeting was done, he would send them back. From the emperor's reaction, it seemed that she no longer thought it would be a trip after all. She thought it might be difficult for them to make the journey if the political meeting were held at the secondary palace. However, when it comes to her birthday celebration, she believed the more, the merrier. The emperor was firm with his decision, and besides, they would only be a distraction to them if they were to stay. As they were on their way home, the princess couldn't hide her concerns. Taking the emperor there would bring her closer to achieving her goal. As soon as they arrived, she went through some unfinished paperwork and remembered that she still had work to do. But she was exhausted. She questioned herself, wondering if she had lived diligently or if she had simply been trying not to be disliked. She suddenly remembered the emperor's words saying to live quietly like a dead rat so His Majesty wouldn't have to pay attention to her. It was the first time she had ever heard those words. She sat in the corner of her room, recalling words she knew she would never forget. She had resolved to live the way the emperor wanted her to, so she could fade into obscurity in a corner of the palace. The princess had no choice but to rely on herself for her escape plan and had no idea how diligent she would be at that time. She assumed that they would not punish her since she was kind and sincere after all and just let her rot in prison for a few years. The princess was running out of time, but she had already prepared everything that she needed. It includes the Book of Prophecy, which she concealed, some jewels she kept on the side, and some gold. She was grateful no one found out about the book since the disguise works like a charm, even though she was the one who made it. As soon as the emperor's political meeting in Utena was over, she worried that her role as the imperial princess might end once she returned Alincia to her rightful place. Every time she looks at the ring of prominence, the princess is tempted to escape. But at the same time, she worries about her own survival and fears that her biological mother might be punished with death. One thing she learned after reading the Book of Prophecy is that everyone has their own hidden stories, including how much the emperor loved the empress and how she thought that Alincia would be happy in her place. But her childhood was no different from her. She thought that maybe both of them would have found happiness a little earlier if she had revealed everything. Those scars in everyone's hearts won't fade away so easily, but to turn her back to all the times she pretended not to know the truth weighs heavily on her mind that she couldn't leave with a light heart. That was the reason why she would bring the real daughter of the emperor. Thinking about it, she should be happy as she would be free soon, but somehow she felt lonely inside of her. The day before her birthday, at Utena Palace, Philomel was staring at the water on the lake. When she was about to touch it, someone said that it was dangerous for her to get too close. The voice belongs to her fiancé, Nassar, who happened to see her. The princess asked if he was worried that she might fall into the water. The young lord apologizes for his unnecessary worries. Her Highness said that it was fine as she had already looked at it enough and asked if he needed to say something to her. Nassar explained that it was not his intention to interrupt her walk as he just wanted to have some tea with her. Philomel didn't directly decline him, and instead she told him that she already had one with the emperor earlier. After saying that, she suggested having tea with someone else while noticing the ladies looking in their direction. She couldn't help but think how popular he was wherever he went. But Nassar declined her idea as he didn't want to have tea with anyone else but her. Looking at his reaction, she thought that it was probably his guilt for not doing his role as her fiancé. Despite the sad look, it didn't bother her, and she excused herself for him to enjoy his tea. While walking past him, she thought that she didn't need to worry about him since he would become the perfect partner when the Real princess came. But Nassar didn't want to end their conversation like that and commented that the really was really beautiful, which halted Philomel from walking. He continued to say that he could now understand why the princess visited that place so often. He told her that he had started to like it from the bottom of his heart. But he was wrong to think like that, as the princess visited that place often so she could execute her plans. She believed that her fiancé was just saying that because he had a kind heart. On the other hand, Nassar couldn't help but feel hurt as the princess was keeping a distance from him. Later that day, the emperor called his daughter and prepared a cake for her. The princess was a little surprised as she already had dessert earlier after her meals, so she couldn't understand why there was a cake. Her father wanted her to eat, and so, while she was eating, she noticed why he was not starting to bring up business, which he normally does. Instead, His Majesty was just staring at her seriously, and it became overwhelming for her. When she was about to start talking to lessen the awkwardness between them, her father handed a box to her. It startled her, so he explained that it was his birthday gift for her. He added that it was his chance to give it since he might become busy tomorrow, which the princess accepted. Now she realized the reason why he was quiet earlier, as if he was getting some courage. The box contained a model ship. His Majesty told her that it was just the miniature version, as the real one was being made, but it didn't make it in time for her birthday. He added that she could ride it whenever she wanted on the lake once it was done. Philomel was a little speechless, as it was the first time that the emperor gave her something that she didn't ask for, and at the same time, it was the first time that someone congratulated her on her actual birthday. When she found out all that time, her birthday was actually Alincia's, and hers was the day before, she realized nothing was ever really hers, and the emperor didn't know about that. His Majesty suggested that it could be a decoration for her room as it was just a model, and added that it was his aide's idea since the actual was still not finished. While listening to him, Philomel couldn't help but notice how talkative he was, which was unusual. He then greeted her, which took him time to say. Even though her birthday that he knew was still tomorrow, he still greeted her with a happy 16th birthday in advance. Philomel was taken aback and just thanked him for it. But at the back of her mind she was fine with him congratulating her and all, but tomorrow was his real daughter's birthday, not hers, which she couldn't even share. The next day, the princess went near the Utna lake just like she planned. Her maid, Countess Delis, reminded her that her birthday banquet would be held after the meeting, so she was worried about not having some rest before the event. But Philomel reassured her that it was fine since she couldn't stay indoors when it was so nice outside. After hearing that, the maid felt happy as she thought that the princess would make a wise empress in the future as she liked to watch the people's lifestyles. Suddenly, her knight informed them that they had already arrived at their destination. He added that it was the only one that matched her description after asking the nearby residents for it. They had no idea what she was looking for, but it was the only house with a green roof on top of a hill, just like what she told them. The knight said that the carriage couldn't go up near the house, so he asked if Philomel wanted them to call the residents over, but the princess insisted that she could go there by herself. Before she could go, she noticed that her knight Martin was happy staring at her as if he wanted to say something to the princess. He then shared how he heard everything about the princess's consideration, which confused her. When he mentioned that she wanted him to stay as her knight, Philomel now knew what he was talking about. She tried to stop the emperor from replacing him, but only for the reason that he looked the easiest to fool when she ran away. The princess just reasoned that he protected her since she was little and was like an uncle to her. That made the knight proud and even said how the princess relied on him so much. But little did he know that Philomel actually hated him. While they were busy talking, a sudden voice of a woman interrupted them. That lady with golden hair approached them and commented how she saw them as important people. When the princess saw her, she couldn't help but think of the details she read many times in the prophecy book. The lady with blue pupils and peach-colored cheeks, with fair, snow-white skin. The girl with a striking resemblance to Empress Isabella appeared in front of her eyes. The real daughter of the emperor. The curious lady talked to them and politely asked if they had some business to attend to in their home. Philomel couldn't believe that she actually found her, and that person's name was Alincia. The girl was puzzled as the princess was not saying anything and was just staring at her. She was startled when Philomel greeted her and asked again what business they had in a countryside village. Since she didn't answer, the girl apologized immediately, as she thought it was something she shouldn't have asked, but the princess didn't mind that at all and questioned if that house was where she lived. Before Alincia could answer, the princess asked if it was okay for her to look inside, as she found it beautiful, but the girl was surprised since they just met. What concerned her the most was that their house was very shabby for someone who seemed important like her. When Philomel heard that, she took it as a rejection, but the girl didn't mean it that way and explained that she was just a little surprised and agreed to look inside their house. The girl escorted the princess, but before they left, she told her knight and maid to wait in the carriage, as it wouldn't take that long. But the two disagreed with her since going alone was dangerous for a princess like her. Philomel insisted and reassured the two that she was going to be fine and would be back soon. A moment later, after a few walks, they finally arrived, and the girl informed her mother that she was back already. Instead of welcoming her, she got mad at the girl for taking so long outside, and she had been doing it lately. She didn't finish her words when she saw the princess, and her daughter wanted to introduce her. Alincia said that the lady wanted to take a look around their house, so she brought her there. The mother seemed like she was familiar with the lady as she dropped the utensil for cooking after seeing her. She then asked who she was, but Philomel just greeted her and didn't mention her name while saying that she found their house beautiful, so she asked her daughter if she could take a look inside. The woman started trembling and her tears flowed as if she was scared of something while telling the princess to go back. She told her that she didn't want to be a noble's entertainment and apologized to her. Her daughter, Alincia, couldn't help but ask if there was something wrong while Philomel shifted their topic to something else. She wanted to know if the mother knew who she was, but the woman couldn't answer her properly. It was as if she didn't want to face the reality she was in at the moment that she lost her balance. Her daughter helps her to get up, worried that she was hurt somewhere, but the woman says not to make a big deal out of it. After that, she told Alincia to go upstairs for a moment as she wanted to talk privately with the princess. When they were left alone, the mother was still on the ground while Philomel introduced herself. After that, she told her that her name came from an ephemeral flower that only blooms in the Utena region. But it seemed like the woman was not interested in that while asking her the reason why she went there. It was not suited for an esteemed person like her, so she told her to go back to where she belonged. When Philomel heard that, she thought how foolish that woman was and said that she was the one who knew it best that there was no such thing as a place where she belonged. The mother was just crying while the princess remembered how she swapped her with Alincia because she couldn't become an imperial princess. The stress of committing that crime led her to harass Alincia. Even though it started like that, she eventually accepted the girl as her own daughter because of her endless kindness. If Philomel waited one more year, the woman would have confessed everything on her own and lost her life to the emperor despite clearly knowing what situation she would be put in if the Real princess appeared. That was why she hated her for that. She then told her that she planned to take Alincia to the emperor right at that moment, to which the woman disagreed. It was not to take her away from her, but to do what was right, and it was to reunite a father and daughter who had never known of each other's existence. The woman didn't agree to it at all, as Alincia was still her daughter even if she didn't give birth to her. Philomel didn't want to argue anymore, and just said that it would be the girl's decision when she found out about the truth. The princess couldn't help but compare herself to a lovely person like Alincia, who was loved by a parent who didn't even share an ounce of blood within her. The woman still reasoned that the girl was hers as she put so much effort into raising her alone. But she stopped talking when Philomel said that she still had no intention of asking about her until the end. She was talking about her not being a little bit interested in how she was doing. However, the woman knew that she was obviously living a luxurious life in the imperial palace. After hearing that, the princess stated that she had no interest in her just like how she was. So she suggested the woman run away immediately if she wanted to live since both of them would be in danger once the emperor knew about the truth. A moment later, Alincia came with the princess without knowing their destination, so she asked her about it. When she answered that they were going to Utena Lake, the girl got excited, as it was really a beautiful place where nobles had built villas near there. She assumed that she must have come there for sightseeing while calling her miss. Since she didn't know her name, she asked the princess about it, and she told her it was Philomel. The girl also stated her name as Alincia and said that they were both named after flowers that grow in Utena Lake. It was a strange coincidence for her, but for Philomel, she knew it was not like that since both of them happened to get their names from the girl's mother, who loved flowers. Thinking about it, Elincia remembered that the imperial princess also had the same name as hers, so she asked if she was Her Highness. But Philomel didn't answer her. While they were talking, Countess Delice was just staring at the girl. She was so confused at the moment since the first time she saw her, she already noticed it. Now that she got to see her up close, the girl looks excessively similar to the late Empress, but it doesn't make sense at all. Elincia suddenly got curious as to why Philomel was going to the Utena Lake together with her. Instead of telling her the reason, the princess apologized as she couldn't tell about it at that moment, and she would eventually find it sooner. The girl just said okay, and a silent air filled the carriage between the three women inside. Philomel stared at the girl and thought that it had become awkward again because of the silence. She couldn't help but think that Elincia must have been surprised as she was taken away without being told anything. Looking at her being quiet, she thought that she looked like a completely different person from earlier when she talked non-stop. But the princess didn't mind it at all since she was sure that the emperor would notice that Elincia was his daughter with just one look. At the gate of the imperial palace, the servant saw the princess's carriage approaching. As it reached the entrance, Countess Delice opened the way for Her Highness. The servant asked her immediately if she enjoyed her outing, to which she responded that she did and asked about her father's whereabouts. Later on, the girl that she brought peeked out of the carriage to see where she was taken. In response to Philomel's inquiry, he told her that Emperor Euston was still in the conference room since the political meeting had been extended. When he noticed the girl standing behind the princess, he asked who the lady was. Princess Philomel just simply answered that he was her guest before taking her hand to come with her. Although the girl was reluctant, she had no choice but to follow her since she was holding her. While Countess Delice, who had been noticing the strange action of the princess, could only watch in confusion, wondering what the princess was planning. Philomel wanted to meet the emperor with her guest immediately. Upon seeing a guard at the conference room's door, she told him that she needed to see her father immediately and ordered him to move aside. But the guard told her that their discussion was still ongoing, trying to make her understand that it was an important meeting. However, Philomel insisted that her reason to see the emperor was an urgent matter, so the guard had no choice but to obey her. He shouted behind the door to inform His Majesty of the princess's request. Without any longer, he received an order to let her come inside. When she was permitted to enter, she saw many important figures gathered there. Their eyes were fixed on her, curious at what could be so urgent to let her interrupt their meeting. As soon as the emperor saw her, he inquired if there was a problem because he knew that the princess would not insist on seeing him unless it was something serious. Without wasting time, she immediately introduced the lady beside her. Unaware of what happened, the lady was caught off guard and nervously stood in silence as she could not even bear to greet His Majesty. Philomel went on by explaining that she accidentally met her at a nearby village and introduced her name as Elincia. She then asked her father if he thought she resembled the late empress. This made her invite her since she suspected that they might be relatives. Upon seeing the guests, Emperor Euston could not utter a word. It was clear from his expression that he was surprised to see a young lady who had a huge resemblance to his late wife. Even the politicians who were at the meeting also noticed that the lady looked just like Empress Isabella. This made everyone fuzzed about the imperial princess. Countess Pollen, who was beside the emperor, noticed the situation. He was observing the situation and called out to His Majesty, but the emperor remained fixated on Elincia, unable to respond. As for his judgment, he knew that they could not continue the meeting in this situation. So he called the attention of everyone and apologized because they had to end the meeting immediately. He announced that it would be rescheduled not any longer before politely dismissing them. Meanwhile, Elincia was still confused about what was going on. Philomel was only staring at her and felt bad for bringing her without informing her about everything. But she knew that this would be fine after everything. She expected that the emperor would recognize the guest as his daughter by just looking at her. The lady stood frozen while sweating, unsure of what was happening. Later on, Count Pollen informed the princess that he would prepare a separate room for her and urged her to come with them. Even the servant noticed and concluded that His Majesty needed some private time with their guest. But Philomel excused herself, saying she would leave Elincia to them for a while as she wanted to change her clothes first. To them it seemed like a harmless request, but she had other plans. The princess returned to her room, where everything that she needed was already prepared, including the book that she read where she found out the truth about her real identity. Instead of changing into how a noble lady dresses, she wore the uniform of the servant. While preparing herself, her mind was set on what she had planned. This was the moment she had been preparing for. She would leave without regrets. Later on, she heard the head maid offering assistance while she was changing. But Philomel declined and assured that she was fine. Yet, she only requested a cup of cold water as she said she was thirsty. Of all the people in the imperial palace, she knew that Countess Dulles would be surprised the most when she disappeared. The head maid responded behind the door that she would bring what she requested and asked her to wait for a while. At this moment, Philomel could only silently thank her for all the care she had shown her. She knew that there was no way she would forget her kindness. As she was about to leave and check again if she already gathered everything she needed, she noticed her birthday gift for the Emperor at her table. She took it and wondered if things would be different if the Emperor had been like he is now from the very beginning. Will her life be spared? But she urged herself to not think about being greedy and put her gift back. In the first place, nothing from the palace was originally hers. As she was about to leave, she sneaked to check the area. Just like what she anticipated, there were servants waiting outside. Everyone was busy talking about the news, and she wanted to take this opportunity to leave effortlessly. She was confident that no one would notice her as she decided to mix in with the crowd because aside from disguising herself as a servant, everyone was busy gossiping. While passing through, she overheard people speculating about the resemblance between the girl and the late Empress. They also suspected that the girl was really a relative since they firmly believed that it was impossible to be related to a commoner. She heard some concluding that the commoner looked even more like Her Majesty than the actual princess, but someone suddenly halted them from saying such a conclusion as they knew that they would be punished if they had been heard. Philomel, ignoring everything, increased her pace before someone might notice her. Just like what she was anxious about, she heard the voice of Nassar calling her. She paused for a moment, wondering why that man was there. But she still continued, making Nassar doubt if he really saw Her Highness wearing the uniform of a servant. Philomel tried to stop herself from turning around because if she did, she knew that she would get caught. She was already sweating, fighting the urge of whether to face him or to just continue her way. Unsure of what to do, she worried that pretending not to hear him might raise suspicion. Though she knew she shouldn't stop striding, her instinct made her do so. Fortunately, the Duke arrived and called out to his son, Nassar. He asked what he was doing there and whether he had any connection to the servant. The boy hesitated to explain what he had seen but eventually shrugged off his thoughts, concluding he must have been mistaken. Philomel was taken aback. She did not know what to feel with what she had heard from him. The Duke then urged his son to come with him since there was also something important that they must discuss. The man was reluctant to leave. For the last time he glanced at the servant whom he thought to be the princess before coming with his father. This made Philomel firm in her decision. There was no looking back, and she must continue to move forward quickly. She began running while reminiscing about the moments she had in the place where she grew up. She remembered her faithful servants who never tired of waking her up every day while bringing some warm milk tea and suggesting barging into her father's room. She also remembered her father praising her for the good work she had done. Then there were the moments with Nassar, when he mentioned the pleasant weather and, at one point, pleaded for her to give him a little of her attention. Those are the memories that were holding her back from leaving, but she decided to run away from all of them. Without looking back, she continued running as fast as she could until she was far enough from the palace. She was panting when she stopped. Given the distance from her previous home, she wondered if the Majesty would not be able to sense the use of divine powers from her location. Upon confirming that no one could locate her, she decided to use her ring, which had been charged with divine powers since the previous year. As she activated the ring, she convinced herself to focus on thinking about the place she wanted to go. She knew that she might be hurt if she got distracted. As the light from the divine power illuminated her area, she bid farewell to everyone, to the people that she cherished and to the place she once called home. At the imperial palace, Emperor Euston had a private meeting with Lady Alincia while Count Pollen was beside him. Silence filled the room. The emperor maintained his stern expression while the lady did not know whether she should smile in nervousness, thinking that she was facing the ruler of their land. Later on, His Majesty started the conversation by asking for her name. The lady responded, telling him that she was Alincia Hessam. When he asked about her parents, she explained that she knew nothing about her father and only knew her mother, who was Catherine Hessam. While listening, the count was positive that none of the emperor's relatives had that surname. But it sounded familiar to him and he tried to recall where he had heard that name before. Later on, Elenisha inquired if the person she was facing at that moment was the emperor, who His Majesty confirmed was him. She then took the courage to ask, although it seemed presumptuous if he might be her father, given their striking similarities. They remained silent, and although they could see some possibilities, the emperor could not confirm them. Elincia continued, explaining how her mother had described her father when she asked about his appearance. According to her, he was a charming man with jet black hair and blue eyes, just like hers. Although her description could perfectly match him, he still does not know how to respond. Those features and their similar color of eyes made her wonder if she was the emperor's child. Emperor Houston was about to respond while his secretary was listening to them. He was about to deny it when someone suddenly barged in, causing their conversation to be interrupted. It was Countess Dallas who hurriedly reported to them that they had a serious problem. The secretary was surprised to see her rushing to them, and they were waiting for her to say what the huge problem she was referring to was. She then immediately informed them that the imperial princess had gone missing. This caught the emperor's entire attention. He immediately went to his daughter's room to find out that she was gone. He inquired the countess about what happened, but she just explained that she only left to get the cold water since her highness requested it, but she did not expect that she would disappear in that short time. Moreover, she informed him that she found a letter that Philomel seemed to write for his majesty. Even though she waited for the princess to return, there were no traces of her coming back. She immediately handed him the letter and assured him that she did not read it. The count worried that the princess might have used the ring to disappear, which could pose a serious problem. The head maid could not calm down in this situation. She suggested searching the entire continent in order to find Princess Philomel. Emperor Houston opened the letter, confirming it was addressed to him. In it, Philomel revealed that Elincia was his real daughter. She explained that she had met the girl on her outing and followed her, which led her to her mother. She wrote that it was Catherine Hound, the friend of her mother who used to be their servant before. She also included that the woman became emotional when she saw her, which resulted in her confessing everything to her. According to the woman, she was there when the late empress gave birth. Out of jealousy, the servant swapped her child with the imperial princess. This made her confirm that she was just her fake daughter. While he was reading, Countess Dallas and Count Pollen were observing him. They looked so worried about what could be the princess's reason for leaving like that. From the letter, Philomel confirmed that she left on her own since she did not know how to face the emperor after knowing this big revelation. She even thanked him for raising her as if she were his and hoped for his good health and a good relationship with her real daughter Elincia. After reading the letter, his hand fell while he was holding the paper. Suddenly, he called the attention of the count and countess and demanded all soldiers be mobilized to find the princess. Emperor Houston was enraged about losing the imperial princess. In so much anger, his veins became visible and his fangs showed up. Regardless of the revelation that she found from her letter, he wanted his people to bring back her daughter. The count and countess agreed to carry out the order immediately, determined to bring her back. Meanwhile, Elincia, witnessing the emperor's rage, wondered if she could somehow help in searching for her highness. Meanwhile, in the northern part of the Empire Sengen, there was a busy and loud town where every merchant was trying to attract some customers. They were shouting about their products, and some were offering low prices in order to sell them. There was also a store where they were offering special sales since they were already closing soon. In the middle of the busy market, Princess Philomel was there. She was halted when she heard a lady calling someone pretty lady to take a look at her products and offered that she had some hats that would suit her. From the distance, Philomel was uncertain if the lady was talking to her because she was facing in her direction. Besides, she knew that she was using a ring to conceal herself. Moreover, even if people look at her, they will not recognize her since she will appear blurry to them. But when someone approached the merchant, she realized that calling the people pretty lady was her strategy to attract some buyers. Realizing this brought her some relief. As she thought about her situation, she sighed while thinking that her time was getting shorter, and she did not know when the search for her would be terminated. Another problem is the divine power inside her ring would fade soon, which means she could no longer conceal herself if that happened. Moreover, since the ring could only take her to the place that she had been before, she needed to find a way to go to the Angelium. Her plan to escape was still in motion. She needed to get farther north, past the borders, where she could eventually reach her real father, Lugwin, the master of the Mage Tower. But for now, she had to set aside that idea. She still had a long way to go before coming to that plan. When she roamed around in her sight, she saw a hat shop. But there was a side of that stopping her from purchasing anything since she knew that she had no time to waste on shopping. However, the other side of her was convincing her that she was now finally free to do whatever she wanted. Those two sides of her, whether buying a hat or not, were contradicting, but then she still went on as she realized that she needed a hat to cover her face since her handkerchief was not enough and did not suit her style. It's been a week since the fake imperial princess disappeared. Since the day she left, the imperial palace has remained gloomy. Count Pollen suddenly heard Nassar calling his attention. Seeing that black smudge below his eyelid, it was evident that he was already tired. He came to the imperial palace to ask if there was already an update regarding the search for Her Highness. But unfortunately, the count could only apologize to him since there was no update yet. A week seemed to take long enough for him to be so worried about the princess. He was wondering where she could possibly be as he wanted to find her as soon as possible. By looking at him, Count Pollen noticed how terrible he looked, which means he had been restlessly searching. He told him that he understood his devastation, but, being concerned about his condition, he reminded him to also look after himself. But the Lord just assured him that he was just fine. Although he denied it, by just looking at him the Count could say that he was not. Moreover, at that rate, if he did not take some rest, he might possibly faint. Hearing about it, Nassar suddenly worried about the possibility of a person collapsing from exhaustion. His eyes widened as he realized something and clarified it to Count Pollen again, yet he could not even answer with immediate reassurance. 4 days ago, the Imperial Palace made an official announcement about the missing princess. The reward was huge, and posters of the princess were posted everywhere. Duke Abryden volunteered to participate in the search and look over witness testimonies. On the other hand, Nassar asked Lord Pollen to share the information with him as well, as he would find the princess no matter what it cost, but sadly they couldn't trace any clue at all about Her Highness's whereabouts. Sometimes, when noble ladies encountered Lord Pollen, they always asked him the same thing, and it was about the rumors circulating around. They wanted to know if it was true that a girl who looked exactly like the late Empress had entered the palace and that the missing princess was actually a fake. Lord Pollen always answered them that those were just groundless rumors. He was sure that His Majesty only issued an order for the search, so he had no idea where those rumors came from. On top of that, for some reason it was spreading much too quickly to be calmed down. The moment the aide went to the Emperor's office to deliver the information he asked for, he was shocked at the sight of him. His Majesty was lying on the floor, so he immediately went near him to check what was happening. Luckily, he still could stand up with the help of Count Pollen. When he asked what happened, His Majesty calmed him down and said to be quiet first. Then he told him that he used too much divine power as he was trying to spread it out as far as he could, but he still couldn't find Philomel. The aide thought that he was being reckless with that since they didn't even know how far the princess went. It was the first time he had been driven to his limits since the Empress's death, which made him wonder if His Majesty would really punish the princess for her crimes when he was acting like that. Count Pollen was so immersed in his deep thoughts that he couldn't hear Nassar calling him. After multiple times, he came back to his senses, and when he did, the young lord asked if there was something on his mind. The Count apologized and answered his question about someone collapsing by explaining that he only mentioned it because he felt like he was about to collapse due to the heavy workload he had currently. Nassar was sure that he was going through a rough time as well, but the Count could see that he looked worse than him. The young lord then excused himself and told the aide to inform him when anything came up. Before he could go, the Count asked if he would go out to search again, to which Nassar said yes, and his destination now would be Sengen. Since the Ring of Prominence could only teleport its user to a place they had been to before, Nassar figured the princess might have gone there, as he remembered she visited that place before. After saying that, the young lord excused himself and went on his way, leaving the Count alone. The aide couldn't help but scratch his face as he nearly shared about the Emperor collapsing, so he thought that he maybe was tired too. Meanwhile, the old nanny of Princess Philomel came back to the palace and shamelessly hugged Alincia, while saying that there was no doubt she was Isabella's daughter. She even told His Majesty that she looked similar to the late Empress when she was young. After hearing that, it leads Alincia to question if she is really the daughter of the Empress and the Emperor. His Majesty didn't answer that, but instead the nanny did and said that she was the only one, which made the young lady happy as she finally found her father. The Emperor then asked the old maid if the time she quit working was the year when Philomel turned 9, to which she answered yes. He then questioned her again if she looked after Philomel since she was a baby, so with a total of 9 years she also answered yes. Hearing those answers from her, His Majesty couldn't believe that she accepted it quite easily, while on the other hand, he was still processing that his daughter was not his real daughter at all. Just looking at the Emperor in that state, Alincia, and the maid couldn't utter a single word, and silence filled the air. When the nanny was about to say something, someone suddenly interrupted them and reported that they had caught the woman. The knights explained that the inspectors found her attempting to cross the border. As soon as Alincia saw her, she immediately went closer and asked if she was okay. But her mother didn't say anything to the young lady. The emperor called her name, Catherine Hound, which surprised her. He then stood up to see if it was really her and confirmed that she was indeed Catherine Hound. After that, His Majesty ordered the woman to tell him the truth if she really switched her daughter with his. She didn't answer it while Alincia was defending her and trying to calm down her father. Since he was still processing accepting his true daughter, he didn't listen to her and grabbed the sword from one of the knights. He pointed it out to Catherine and asked if she was refusing to speak the truth that she switched their daughters. Since she was already in that state, there was no point in hiding it, so she answered yes, that Alincia was his daughter and Princess Philomel was her daughter. When His Majesty heard that, a loud scream echoed inside the room, which surprised Count Pollen. His Majesty was trying to hold back his anger towards the woman when he used the sword on her hands while Alincia tried to stop him. The aide knew it was dangerous for the young lady to interrupt, so he pulled her away from Catherine. Alincia begged her father not to end her foster mother's life, but the Count knew that the woman would most likely die there at that moment. Considering the Emperor's character, he would not forgive her, so hurting that woman's hands was only the beginning. All he could do for the young lady was to spare her from witnessing Catherine's death. After that, the Emperor wanted an answer from her as to why she bit the hand that fed her. He even reminded her how Isabella was kind to the likes of her, which made the woman start to cry as she remembered those moments she had with her friend. It was that time when they visited a place full of flowers and Catherine asked for her friend's child's name, to which she answered it would be Alincia. The late Empress added that it felt right to name her after a flower from that place, and her beloved liked that too. While thinking of those times she had with her friend, she couldn't control her anger anymore towards the Emperor. She blamed him for ignoring her and the late Empress for going back to her hometown, which angered His Majesty. She even yelled at him, saying that none of that would have happened if it were not because of them. That triggered the Emperor, making him lift the sword in his hands, ready to swing at her head. Everyone was in great shock, including Count Pollen, who already expected it and closed his eyes. Lady Alincia's nanny, whose mouth was wide open, was surprised at the current situation she was seeing with her own eyes. Catherine Hound already accepted her fate at the hands of His Majesty, and Alincia, whose eyes were covered by the aide, shouted at her father, hoping not to end her adopted mother's life. In the end, the Emperor couldn't do it and just said that she looked like her, but he never noticed it. The woman was surprised and, at the same time, confused after hearing what he stated. Count Pollen took his hand off the lady's eyes, who had the same reaction as her foster mother. His Majesty then said again that the child resembled the woman in front of her. After saying that, he ordered the knights to put Catherine in prison, which left her speechless. A moment later, the nanny was talking non-stop with Alincia about how she suspected that Catherine would be the culprit and that she told Isabella not to get close to her. Count Pollen noticed her, so he ordered her to leave so he could take care of the rest. Sensing that she might get kicked out again, she went closer to the lady while saying that the aide was not a delicate man that the princess could depend on. When she suggested that she should be the one taking care of the lady, Alincia was not paying any attention to her, as if she was in deep thought. The nanny noticed the princess, so she called her, which made her come back to her senses, and she just agreed to her. After hearing that, the old woman shamelessly asked for a room so she could take care of the princess, while the count knew that she was using her highness as an excuse to remain in the palace. The aide had no choice but to do it since the princess was on her side and gave her permission to stay by her side. Count Pollen told the nanny that it was just temporary until a new maid was assigned to serve Miss Alincia and reminded her not to forget why she got kicked out. While the two were busy conversing, the princess looked worried. She then interrupted them to ask something from the aide while he was there. The lady was suddenly curious if her father, the Emperor, was not happy that she had been found. Count Pollen answered that it was certainly not the case, as he just needed time to accept everything, and it had been confirmed that she had divine power, so she was undoubtedly His Majesty's daughter. He added not to be too upset about it. Alincia was still worried about it, but she still thanked the aide for saying that and excused herself. The count didn't say more and just told her to rest well while the nanny followed the princess. The old woman was happy that she was given the chance to serve the real princess now. On the other hand, it was clear on the lady's face that she was not happy at all after leaving the aide in that room. Meanwhile, in the northernmost point of the empire, Angelium, there were men talking about the news of Princess Philomel not being the real daughter of the Emperor. All of them were drinking while saying that they heard about it everywhere and even commented that if it was true, then her mother must have kidnapped the real princess. They assumed she was a criminal's daughter pretending to be a princess the whole time. Philomel was sitting in the corner of that place listening to them as they talked about catching her to get rich from the bounty. She activated the magic and dyed her hair just in case, but she still didn't feel safe, and all she heard everywhere was about her. The princess expected that the emperor would at least spare her a little, but he was still looking for her. Philomel couldn't help but think that His Majesty hated her so much that he ordered her to be found anywhere. Suddenly, a woman offered some tea to her if she was done with her meal, but the princess refused it as she was on her way out. The woman then asked if she was going to spend the night there again, to which Philomel answered that she would think about it after she went out. With a happy face, she assumed that the lady had a business at the Mage Tower, which surprised Philomel. That woman explained that most of the people who came there were like that. Even though Angelium was a small city, people kept visiting it because of the Mage Tower. They all come to buy expensive magic gadgets or bring a bunch of money to commission the mages. Before she finishes conversing with the lady, she warns her not to stay out too late since there have been many scoundrels looking for money in that place. A moment later, at the Mage Tower, there were too many people lined up in front. Philomel was one of them. She was so surprised and, at the same time, amazed after seeing it up close. That place was huge, and it didn't look like a tower for her. It was more like a castle because of its magnificent design. Just looking at those people gathered in front, she couldn't help but wonder if she would be able to meet that person that day. Philomel questioned herself if that person would meet with someone like her, as she heard it was hard for even high-ranking nobles to meet the Mage Tower's master. Suddenly, someone approached her and asked if she had some business in the Mage Tower. When she said that she did, the man told her that she was out of luck that day because of that long line and she wouldn't see a mage even if she got in now. What surprised her was when that man said that they wouldn't reopen until next week. Philomel couldn't accept that since there was no guarantee she wouldn't get caught before that. She might even be executed on the spot if her escape was counted as a crime, which scared her just by thinking about it. That man said that there may still be a way, which caught the princess's attention. She asked what it was, and the old man answered that he knew a few mages in the Mage Tower. After hearing that, the lady told him to introduce her to them, but it looked like he wanted something in return. Philomel knew that the person in front of her was a broker, so she fully understood what that man wanted from her. She didn't hesitate to get some money from her little bag, which made the man happy. As she opened it, he could see a pile of shining gold, which tempted that man to do something to the lady. While she was busy getting some from it, that old man suddenly snatched it from her and ran away as fast as he could. It was so fast that Philomel couldn't react, so all she could do was shout at him while he was running. He smiled back at her and said that she should just think of it as helping out an old man like him. But he didn't see that someone was already on his way and then kicked his foot, which caused him to fall to the ground. The princess was surprised, as she didn't expect that, as she thought her money was already gone. A man in a robe couldn't believe that there were still bastards who pulled those low-level scams while stepping on that man's back. He asked the old man if he was aware that he was in Mage Tower territory, but instead of answering, he got mad at him as he was older than him and even dared to ask for his parents. That man in a robe smiled and said that his parents never taught him to respect the elders. He then pressed his foot harder on his back while saying that he would deal with him under the law of the Mage Tower and not the Empire. Looking at the situation, Philomel couldn't believe that someone from the Mage Tower helped her, but she was more concerned for that old man's life. Even though he stole her money, she stopped the man in the robe, as he could kill him if he continued to press on his back. That person just looked at the princess and turned his gaze away as if he was displeased for stopping him any further. He then suddenly called someone named Lection, as he knew he was hiding, so he told him to show up already. Another man showed up behind Philomel, and she was surprised, as she didn't know when he got there. The silver-haired guy removed his hood and asked his companion if he just planned to watch earlier while a visitor was getting scammed. Lection answered that he saw him stepping in first, so he decided to observe the situation from the sidelines. Besides that, he didn't expect the silver-haired guy to make the first move, but it seemed like he was annoyed by his words. Looking at the two men who suddenly showed up to help her, she couldn't help but think about what was really happening at that moment. The silver-haired guy was just looking at the princess with a serious look on him. On the other hand, Lection smiled at her while asking her reasons why she visited the Mage Tower. A moment later, one of them throws the stolen gold back to the princess. She then expresses her gratitude to that guy for helping her. The silver-haired man told Philomel not to walk around without her brains. He even scolded her for not thinking that there would be any scammers around when she came to the Mage Tower. The lady didn't deny that fact and just realized that it was what the innkeeper said to her earlier. Her smile suddenly froze when he commented on how naive she was, as it really annoyed the princess. He then said that he was going to pass that old man to the regulatory department, so Lection should take care of the rest. While he was walking away, Philomel was more annoyed by the fact that the silver-haired guy was right about what he said, since she did fall for that scammer. Suddenly, the other guy asked her if she needed help with something, so she answered that she wanted to see the Mage Tower's master, Legwin, and asked if it was possible to set up a meeting with him. Before giving her a reply, he wanted to know why she was trying to meet him. The princess hesitated for a while, since she was not sure if he would trust her, but she had no other option left anyway, so she told him the truth. When she said that she was his daughter, Lection froze for a moment, as he didn't expect that. Philomel noticed it and assumed that he was going to think she was crazy. She already anticipated it since she came there because of the Book of Prophecy. But she was surprised when he said that he allowed her to meet him if she was Logan's daughter and guided her to the back door. The princess was so confused, as she didn't expect him to believe her that easily. After they entered the Mage Tower, she could see the magnificent design of the building. There were some mages who were busy experimenting on monsters who breathe fire. While walking, Philomel wanted to ask the person guiding her and called him Mr. Magician, but that man said to just call him Lection. The lady did what he said and asked if Legwin was married, to which he answered no. After hearing that, she thought it was a relief. But if he didn't have an affair with Catherine, her real mother, she wondered what their relationship would be. Lection had a feeling he could tell what she was thinking from asking that. The princess then asked him again if he was not surprised after hearing her say that she was Legwin's daughter. He answered that he was not, but he was curious as to why it took her so long to come to the Mage Tower. She didn't understand what he meant by that, so she asked him. However, she didn't get any answer at all, and he just told her to watch her step, which surprised the lady. After she looked at the floor, she knew it was a floating stone. Lection thought that she had used that before, even though it was pretty rare. That caught the princess off guard, so she made an excuse that she only saw it in a book. He then told her that they would arrive at their destination shortly, but before she could enter, he suggested she remove what was on her finger while calling her Princess Philomel. The mage added that Legwin was not fond of divinity, but it was not the reason she was surprised. It was because he knew her identity. Philomel explained that she was not trying to hide it on purpose. Lection knew about it since he had more interest in the outside world compared to other magicians. She asked if he was going to report her, but he answered that if he was, he wouldn't have brought her to the Mage Tower's master. There was also one thing he told her before meeting up with her father, and it was to try not to take what Legwin says to heart. Finally, they reached the door where her father was. Looking at it, she couldn't help but be nervous, as the Magic Tower Master, her real father, was inside that door. After entering, Lection called Legwin's attention and told him that someone claiming to be his daughter had come with him. When he heard that, he had no idea who it was, so he asked Lection about it. But instead of answering, the mage said that he brought that person with him, so he asked if he wanted to meet her. The Mage Tower Master seemed to have no other choice, so he answered that he should see her at least once. He then turned around and looked at Philomel. On the other hand, the princess was a little surprised, as she was now facing her real father, Legwin, the Magic Tower Master. But instead of being happy, he glances at her with a serious look, as if he were looking inside of her. That scared the princess, and she felt a strange feeling about it. Other than the fact that they have the same eye color, they were nothing alike, so she thought that something was not right. Lection asked Legwin if he wanted to leave them alone, but he answered that he had something to tell him after talking to her, so he should stay there. The master then happily greeted the princess while introducing himself as Legwin. When he asked for her name, she told him it was Phil. After that, he invited her to sit down. Suddenly, he asked for her hand, which surprised the lady. She had no idea what was going on when he wanted her to give her hand to him, but she obeyed him and thought that she should do what he wanted. After he held it, the princess suddenly felt pain inside of her, as if something had gone through her. Lection was shocked and asked if she was all right, while Legwin said that she had a tiny bit of magic, but it was almost like an empty shell. Lection then scolded the master, as he needed to ask people for permission to do that, since it was hard to handle if that person was not a magician. When Philomel asked what just happened, Lection answered that he poured his magic inside her to check her magic. On the other hand, Legwin apologized to her. Since she said she was his daughter, he assumed she was a magician. The mage said that it would feel like a small pinch to magicians, but it must have been painful to her, so he apologized on the master's behalf, as that was how he was. Legwin told her that it was a ridiculously small amount, but it was his magic, so that meant she really was his daughter. Looking at him as if he was not interested at all, the princess didn't expect that the first meeting with her real father would turn out like that. He was treating his daughter, whom he met for the first time, like someone he had no connection with. She couldn't help but be annoyed, as there were so many things she wanted to ask when they met. The lady wanted to know why he left her mother, if he was aware that he had a daughter, if he would accept her like he accepted Philomel in the book, and if he had any affection for her at all. But the only question she asked was why he left her pregnant mother all alone, to which he answered that he didn't remember well, but her mother wanted to stay there. If it were not for that, he would have had her come to the magic tower. After hearing all that, she was not sure about anything that person was thinking or saying, but there was one thing that caught her attention, and it was that he didn't remember who her mother was at all. A long time ago, there was a child who didn't have a family, but he had immense magic within him. The power he wielded that could change the weather or slay a dragon with the flick of a finger was called a stellion. But the price he paid for that power was the feeling of emptiness. He didn't understand normal emotions, and he was indifferent to everything other than his interests. Then one day he started an experiment. He offered a handsome reward to female volunteers and tried to make an artificial child by combining their human bodies with a stellion. What he said to them was that he wanted a child who had his power, but creating life was not as easy as it seemed, and the few who were born with magic barely had a stellion. Because of that, the man suddenly stopped his experiment and decided to stay alive for a long time by stopping his body from aging. Even though he knew he would be walking a path where he would be alone forever, he didn't hesitate even for a moment. The magic tower master told Philomel that it was a bit hard for him to remember something that happened more than 10 years ago. The princess was determined, so she told him that her mother was Catherine Hounds and she looked exactly like her. She then asked if he remembered anything after looking at her. To get a closer look, Legwin leaned in front of her face, which surprised Philomel. After that he noticed that she dyed her hair just looking at her, so he snapped his finger to reveal the princess's true appearance. Just like that, because of his magic, her hair turned brown again, which shocked her. Now that he saw her true look, he felt like he might remember something, but he was not sure yet. But just after a second, he happily told Philomel that he still didn't know her, as if it was not a serious matter. The princess couldn't believe that he couldn't remember anything at all, but she started to get annoyed when he asked her if there was a reason that he should. The magic tower's master was sure she came there for something, so he asked what she wanted. It was as if she got insulted by those words, and what was more, he asked if she wanted money because it was going to be difficult for her to become a magician with the little magic she had. Legwin continued to talk and said that he could even give her the money her mother never took, and with that, he was sure it would all be enough. That made her start crying, to which Legwin couldn't understand why she acted like that. Philomel then got up and exclaimed that she didn't need money or anything else from someone like him. Even though the princess was already angry, it seemed like the tower master was not affected by it, and even questioned why she didn't need the money. Her Highness then told him that even though they share the same blood, it was better to treat each other as strangers. She then made her way out and apologized for bothering him. It was a mistake for her to even come there to meet that father of hers. And without looking back, she said that she would never appear before him again, so she wished him to have a good life. After she left, Legwin was clueless as to why she behaved like that when all he did was offer her something that everyone wanted. Lekshin, on the other hand, told his master that he could have worded it better than being direct. He then asked him if he really couldn't see that the lady was different from them. That made Legwin speechless because his encounter with her was so new to him that he didn't know how to act properly. Meanwhile, the princess was on her way outside of that place after experiencing harsh treatment from her real father. She was blaming herself for being a fool for expecting something from him, so she decided to just cross the border and leave for another country. It was stupid of her to think that a person like Legwin would have any affection for her. While she was busy with her thoughts, Lekshin tried to stop her. He wanted to accompany her and asked if she could just listen to him while they walked. When the princess asked what he wanted to say, Lekshin explained that he thought her mother didn't tell her everything about her birth. After hearing that, she commented about how her real father was a shameless cad, to which the man agreed. She then apologized for letting her anger out on him even though he was not even a part of it. But Lekshin said that it was not because, technically, he was her half-brother. Besides him, she also has 2 other brothers, which really surprised the princess. While he continued to say that they have different mothers, Philomel couldn't help but have a headache for having such a complicated family. After saying that, Lekshin asked if she could calm down now and was willing to hear him out. Since she had no choice and wanted to know more about them, she nodded in response. A moment later, she heard everything from her half-brother, that they were children who were born from an experiment. Lekshin, Jeremiah, and Kadin grew up in the magic tower after they were born, but her mother was against staying there. Philomel then asked if he was trying to say that there was nothing she could do about her father's heartlessness because she was born from an experiment. Her brother answered her by saying that it was probably the first time Legwin had a child like her. He never treated them as his children, but they also never expected him to act like their father. For them, he was more like a teacher or an employer than a father. With that being said, Legwin probably never expected that she would be so disappointed. The princess was still a bit sad, as she was still a failure in her father's eyes. She was not born out of love, and she didn't have any magic, which made her feel like she was a fake at the magic tower too. She couldn't help but think that she didn't belong anywhere, as she was not the real daughter of the father she grew up with, and her real father didn't want her. After they reached the door, the princess thanked Lekshin for escorting her. But before she could totally leave the magic tower, her half-brother called her name, which stopped her from walking. He reminded her that she could contact him any time if she ever needed any help. The princess doubted him, so she asked if he cared so much about her because he was her sister, to which he answered yes, even if it was hard for her to believe that. But he eventually told his reason, and it was because he became very interested in studying her. He wondered why she was different from her emotionless brothers, even though they were all born from the same experiment. When Philomel heard that, she assumed that maybe it was because she barely had any stellium. Lekshin said that it was possible, but he thought it was not the only reason. He then suggested she become his assistant, and that he would pay very well if she didn't want to be studied. But the princess honestly told him that she didn't know anything about working with magic. Her half-brother was determined and said that he knew she would catch on quickly so she could learn everything. He even added that the magic tower was the perfect place to hide her identity, and not even His Majesty could touch that place. The princess finally gave in, but she asked him to give her some time to think about it, to which Lekshin accepted and said that she could take all the time she needed. After that, Philomel then went her way while her half-brother stared at her back. When he was finally alone, he asked himself what he could do about that man, their father, who was beyond help. A moment later, Lekshin went back to his master's room. When he asked why he was there, he answered that he had told him earlier to stay because he had to talk to him. But instead of answering him, he told his son to just go with his sister since he was practically singing about his sister and didn't even see his teacher. Lekshin said that it was Kadin who was singing and not him. However, it seemed like he was not interested in that. The son leaned closer to his father to take a look at what he was doing while asking him if he was thinking about Philomel. Legwin quickly answered no, but Lekshin thought differently. It was obvious that he was affected by the princess. Judging by the magic array that had not changed at all since earlier, it was clear that he was thinking about his daughter. After that, Legwin said that there was nothing else to know about her since it was over after she ran away, saying that she hated him. When Lekshin heard that, he couldn't help but think of him as a childish fool, so he just accepted what he said. However, he informed her that Philomel had nowhere to go. He even added how concerned he was for a girl who had not even come of age yet and would survive in a harsh world. To make him feel more affected, Lekshin shared how Philomel could have lost all of her money to a pickpocket earlier if Jeremiah had not helped her. The magic tower master said that he didn't care at all, but his son knew that he was not being honest with himself. Judging by his reaction, he anticipated that it would take him 10 days or even just a week to look for Philomel. Since the stones have already been thrown, let them fall where they may within the next few days. Meanwhile, the princess went back to the inn where she was staying and ordered some food. But even though her meal was already being served, it seemed like she had no appetite, as she was busy thinking about how she was born from an experiment. She wondered how they were connected and thought that it was probably best for her to accept Lekshin's offer. But then again, if she were to do that, she would have no choice but to live with her deceptive father. Even if she leaves and goes to a different country, finding a way to hide her identity is the problem. While she was busy with her thoughts, she noticed the light on her ring had faded so much, which meant the divinity on it must be running out. Because of that, she needed to find a replacement for it first. That made her sigh and wonder when the emperor would give up looking for her. A second later, her mood became serious while thinking that His Majesty was probably living happily by now. In the book that she read, Eustace was more affectionate to his real daughter than anyone else. Thinking about it hurt her, as Alencia was nothing like her, who didn't receive love from either of her parents. Just before those thoughts could affect her more, she suddenly got up to get things done instead of moping around. She then asked one of the staff where the famous magic tool store was that was near that inn. Meanwhile, somewhere in a boutique, there were people complimenting how shiny those jewels were. A lady named Roseanne didn't agree with their choices and told them to get that jewelry out of her face. The lady then informed one of the staff there that she was the cousin of the reputable Duke Muriel and ordered her to bring out the more expensive items, as she didn't like those things she recommended. While they were at it, Roseanne thought that she couldn't just pick any old thing after she came all the way there for the opportunity she had been waiting for, to be the center of high society. She suddenly noticed another customer and thought that she had come to that corner of the city because she heard that accessories charged with magic were quite popular, but she couldn't believe she had to shop in the same store as a commoner. On the other hand, the princess asked one of the staff if they had any magic tools for disguise, to which she answered that she needed to have national clearance for a magic tool like that. A moment later, the girl she ordered earlier came back with something else just for her, but before she could try it, she noticed something. Her servants were confused as to why the lady walked away from the stuff holding those jewels. She then suddenly grabbed the princess's hand, which greatly surprised Her Highness. Roseanne told her that she had stolen something more valuable than she was while calling her a commoner. She added that she hated people who didn't know their place. On the other hand, Philomel asked the lady to let her hand go as she misunderstood something. But it seemed like the lady had no intentions of letting her go, so she ordered her servants to hold the princess even without knowing who she was. The two obeyed their master while Philomel tried her best to explain her side, but Roseanne was not listening to her and was about to get the ring on her finger. Her Highness couldn't do anything while the lady started to take that ring off her finger. All she could do now was to shout at them to release her, but it was already too late, as the lady already had it. The noblewoman said that she would make sure that the ring goes to its rightful owner. But she stopped in the middle as soon as she saw who the person was in front of her, which greatly surprised her. She was very familiar with her because she was the princess before the real daughter of the emperor showed up. It was Princess Philomel who was hiding her identity through that ring. The lady then ordered the people around her to quickly report her to the authorities, which surprised her. Since she couldn't let that happen, she opposes Roseanne while reasoning that she got the wrong person and they just look alike. When the lady heard that, she slapped the princess without hesitation, which surprised everyone. She then told her that she was not a fool for not recognizing her. The noblewoman even added that she was not a princess anymore and would end her right at that moment if it was up to her, but she was restraining herself. With a big smile on her face, she warned her to just stay put and not to do anything until the authorities got there. Meanwhile, a group of knights was searching near that place, and one of them stopped their lord. He informed him that the sun would set soon and Angelium was not far, but everyone was exhausted from searching without any rest for the past few days. They even looked around all of Sengen, and besides, their lord Nassar didn't look well either. But it seemed like Nassar had no intentions of stopping, so he told him that he would go by himself from there and they could catch up after getting some rest. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by something. The lord saw that there was a carriage just in front of them. On the other hand, the person inside that carriage was happy and thought that she got lucky that day. It was Lady Roseanne who was thankful for the incident earlier, as she now has something to talk about in high society. She was so proud of herself as she played a part in catching the fake Princess Philomel. That made her think that she could befriend the real princess because of what she did. Suddenly, her servants were surprised when the lady ordered them to stop the carriage in the middle of the road. Lord Nassar and his knights were halted by how fast the carriage passed them by. But what surprised the young lord was when someone called his attention, and she was from that carriage that stopped so suddenly. It was Lady Roseanne who went down from the carriage while asking if he was Lord Nassar Aberdeen. Upon looking at him, she was sure that her intuition was very accurate while her eyes sparkled. She could tell that radiant blonde hair, those red eyes, and a face that looked like an angel statue belonged to the most eligible bachelor in the empire. When the young lord turned to look at her, he confirmed that he was indeed Nassar Aberdeen and asked if she had business with him. His question startled the lady as she stopped him without thinking, so she didn't know what to say. However, Roseanne suddenly remembered that the lord's engagement with the fake princess might have been called off already, so she thought that it would be her opportunity to leave a lasting impression on him. After that, the lady introduced herself and said that she was Duke Muriel's niece. When Nassar heard that, he said that she must be Viscount Manon's daughter, but it made him confused, as House Manon resided near the border, which was very far from where they were at the moment. That surprised the lady, as she didn't expect him to say that, so she diverted their topic to something else. She told the young lord that she had some news that would interest him. When he asked what it was, Lady Roseanne proudly said that she found the fake princess in Angelium. Upon hearing those words from her, Nassar was in such great shock that he couldn't believe it. But suddenly, after processing it, he immediately went closer to the lady, which surprised her. The young lord yelled at her while asking where the princess was at that moment. Roseanne couldn't answer properly as she was startled by his action, but she still managed to tell him that she already called the authorities there and handed her over to them, so there was nothing for him to worry about. The lady thought that the young lord was excited as she captured a criminal, but she had no idea how Nassar yearned to see the princess after she disappeared. Since he already knew that Her Highness was at the Angelium security office, there was no time to waste anymore. He immediately rode his horse and told his subordinates that he would go first to where the princess was. Since their lord was eager to go there as fast as he could, the knights had no choice but to follow him as well, leaving Lady Roseanne behind. Without saying anything or even words of gratitude before leaving, the lady was so confused about what just happened at that moment. Meanwhile, at the Angelium security office, it was so dark that silent air filled every cell in it. The princess felt the cold inside while her hands were chained as if they treated her as a prisoner. Her cheek was swollen from the slap made by Lady Roseanne. She thought that even her nanny had never done that to her before. Philomel heard from the head of security that the lady was Roseanne Manon, so her attitude explains everything, which irritates her. Suddenly, two guards were talking about her. One of them asked if she was the famous fake princess, to which the other answered that she was since she looked exactly like the one in the poster. They continued talking in front of her and said that she seemed so normal, so the guard wondered why she did it. The black-haired guy answered that he didn't know but added that it looked like she couldn't hide the bad blood she was born with. A moment later, one of the prisoners in the other cell caught Philomel's attention while calling her a fake princess. He told her that since she was going to die anyway, she should have some fun with them. He continued to mock Philomel as he thought she was looking down at them even after she pretended to be a classy princess. Her Highness was just staring at them even after that prisoner told her that they were better than a fake who deserved damnation. Philomel couldn't help but think how foolish she was for not keeping the ring hidden. She knew that she was going to end up dead sooner or later if she stayed like that. The princess questioned herself if she was going to die in vain just like that, and if a villainess could never escape her fate. Since she didn't want that, she needed to do something, so she called one of the guards' attention. Philomel told him that her name was Charlotte Tate, a passing tourist, so she denied being the fake princess. But he didn't accept that and said to stop talking nonsense. He added that she should just stay quiet since no one would be going to believe her lies in that place. However, the princess didn't give up and told him that there was at least one person in the world who just looked like her, and she even had a witness who could confirm her identity. They could call the magic tower and ask for Lection, the magician, as she was his little sister. They were startled upon mentioning that name. The guards were aware that Lection was the head magician of the magic tool management department, so the princess took that chance to say that her big brother adored her so much. She even acted sad while saying that Lection must be devastated to hear that his little sister was locked up in a place like that. The two were not sure if she was telling the truth, but if she was, they knew they would be in big trouble. The black-haired guard said that he would make a call even if he didn't believe her. However, if it was a lie, he warned her to prepare herself because no one would care if a criminal's arm or leg was broken. The princess was a bit relieved that her acting worked since Lection would realize what was happening right away. The only thing she was worried about was if he would go along with her story. Suddenly, they heard a man's voice telling them that there was no need for them to do that, which surprised Philomel. It was the general of that security office. He said that someone who knew the fake princess had arrived and that man would make the decision. The general guided that man inside and told him that they received a report a few hours ago and they kept her locked up there. When Her Highness heard that, her heart beat faster as she was nervous to know who it was. But it didn't matter at all since it was all over for her if it was anyone who really knew her. She didn't know what to do anymore and just accepted that it was already over. She could have escaped if she had a little more time earlier. However, the moment when that man called her Princess Philomel, she was in great shock, as she already knew who it was even without looking. To make sure her guess was right, she turned her head to look at him, and there she saw Nassar standing in front of her cell, who also had a surprised look on his face. Meanwhile, at the Mage Tower, Lection was sleeping so soundly when someone suddenly went inside his room to wake him up. Even though he was still sleepy, he got up from his bed to ask Legwin what he was doing there late that night. His master wanted to know if he knew where the lady was staying. At first, Lection had no idea who he was talking about, but after some thought, he assumed he might be referring to Phil, so he answered that she was probably in Angelium. After saying that, Legwin ordered him to contact her immediately and tell her to come to the magic tower right away, as he needed to see her one more time. Lekshin couldn't believe that he was ordering him at that hour, so he told him that he would do that in the morning since the lady might be asleep as well. But his master insisted on doing it right away. Lekshin had no choice but to tell him that no one likes being woken up from their sleep, and he already had ruined her first impression of him. Since he had a point, Legwin agreed to call her in the morning. His student already predicted that, but he couldn't believe that he didn't even last one day. After that, silent air filled the room, and Lekshin was confused as to why his master was still there. When he asked why he was not going away, Legwin answered that it would be better to contact Phil right at that moment. That irritated the student, as he had already told him that he would bring her in the morning, so he threw things at him to make him get out. After that, Lekshin used his magic to slam the door and lock it so he couldn't come anymore. When he was finally gone, the student commented on how self-centered his master really was. He then turned to look out his window and smiled at the future events that were about to come to them. He was happy as they would have to get ready to welcome their new family member. Back at the Angelium security office, Nassar was grateful to see that Her Highness was all right since he was so worried about her. However, he was confused as to why she was locked in there like a criminal. He then told her to wait as he would get her out as soon as possible. The princess turned her gaze away from him as he was the last person she wanted to see. The general then suddenly told the young lord that he would give him the keys, but it seemed like he was not listening to him at all. His reason for that was that he was planning to use his sword to break that cell, since it was the easiest way to get the princess out. When he sliced that metal cell into pieces, the princess was shocked, as she didn't expect him to do that. Her Highness asked, why did he do that? Nassar didn't answer her. Instead, he asked for her hand. He then breaks those chains and says that he never imagined she would be in a place like that. After that, the young lord asked her to come back to the palace with him as if he were begging her. His face made the princess hesitate to answer, as she was confused as to why he was looking at her like that, as if he was actually worried about her. Since she didn't answer him, Nassar didn't push that topic and just gave Her Highness's jacket since it was cold out there. Looking at how close they were, one of the guards couldn't help but ask their general what was going on. They knew the fake princess was a criminal, as the people in the streets were also saying that. However, the general said that she was not. When he thought about it, their only order was to find the missing princess by any means necessary. They never said they had to catch a criminal, so it makes sense now seeing how the young lord treated her. It made him question them as to why they never even asked about it, as if everyone was under a spell to believe a lie. After hearing that, one of the guards realized what they did to the princess earlier was wrong. Suddenly, they were surprised when the young lord informed them that they would get going since escorting Her Highness was their top priority right now. But before that, he coldly reminds them that they would have to explain exactly why the princess ended up like that later. He added that a few Aberdeen knights would remain there, so there was no chance for them to run away. After seeing how he warned them, the general thought about how he had heard of the genius son of House Aberdeen before, but he couldn't believe that the man was really not even 20 years old yet. Before they could go, the princess had to do something, so she asked Nassar to wait. She then raises her hand in front of the guards because of what they told her earlier. When the black-haired man was confused, Her Highness reminded him about her being prepared to lose an arm or leg if she was lying. Their body froze after she told them that she was giving him a special chance right now to follow through on what he said, but they told her that they wouldn't dare do that. The princess then reprimands them for calling themselves protectors of Belarov when they didn't even know that it was a crime to punish prisoners who had not been tried in court yet. That guard bowed his head in front of the princess and asked for her forgiveness for the terrible mistake he made. After that, Her Highness called the attention of one of the prisoners who mocked her earlier. That man was surprised when she asked if she was worth less than a scum like him. Since he didn't answer, Philomel thought that it was not even worth her time talking to them, so she just let it slide. The princess then invited Nassar to go, but before he moved, he stared at that prisoner with a cold look on his face as if he was angry after hearing those words that he said to the princess. That scared the man, as he could feel he could die on his hand at any moment, so he begged him for his life. However, Nassar controlled himself, and when the general saw him, he couldn't believe that he was the same person he just met earlier. The young lord suddenly asked for the black-haired guard's name, to which he answered that it was Ian Solbrit. After hearing that, he told him that he would remember that and also the others' faces as well. He added that he would be back soon, so it would be best for them not to even think about running. But what scared them most was when the young lord said that he hoped that they did run so he could punish them according to his will because he was not as merciful as Her Highness was. While the two were in the carriage, Nassar apologized to the princess, as they came there on horses, so a normal carriage might be uncomfortable. He asked for her to bear with it until they got to Sengen. Philomel said that she was fine, and she realized that she left Princess Alentia at the inn, but if she were to go back, the contents would surely be discovered, so she had to give up that book for now. Suddenly, Nassar touched her face, as her cheek was swollen, which surprised Her Highness. That made the young lord ask if someone hit her, but the princess denied it and told him that she just fell. After hearing that, he felt relief and said that they couldn't just let it be, so he handed her something. It was an ointment his family's magician made. He uses it since he wields a sword. Nassar was sure that applying it on her himself would make her uncomfortable. The princess noticed that he had that expression again on his face. It was as if he was really worried for her. Because of that, Philomel grabbed the ointment and said that she could do it. While applying it, she was positive that Nassar was misunderstanding the situation, as there was no way His Majesty would order a search just to find his fake daughter. She couldn't help but wonder what she should do to get out of that situation since she couldn't tell Nassar about the book, and running away again was too difficult. As she was already with him, she had no choice but to try every way she could. Philomel then got up, which surprised the young lord, and asked if she was worried about something. But what she did next really surprised him because she suddenly went closer and grabbed his hand. It was clear that he was confused after she did that while the princess said she had a favor to ask. Their faces were already facing each other, and Her Highness told him to pretend that he hadn't seen her that day. The young lord wanted to say something, but Philomel continued and begged him to grant her a favor. Nassar couldn't think clearly as she was too close to him, and he told her that it was dangerous if she got up so suddenly like that. A moment later, their carriage bumped into something that caused Her Highness to lose her balance. That worries the young lord. Luckily, he had quick reflexes, so he caught her and held her tightly. Her head was buried on his chest, and the carriage went back to its usual pace, filling the air between them with silence. Nassar then suddenly asked if she was hurt, but instead of answering, she begged him to listen to her. Philomel looked at him and said that she would die if she went back to the palace. After that, she asked him if he wanted that to happen to her, which greatly shocked Lord Nassar. The young lord calmed down the princess, as there was no way that would happen. He wanted to know who would dare try to harm her, to which she answered that it was His Majesty because she thought that the emperor wouldn't worry for her since she was not his real daughter. Nassar explained to her that the rumors about her being fake were not true. However, the lady insisted that she was still not his daughter. He told her that it was not possible because His Majesty wouldn't believe such a thing. Philomel already accepted that fact, and also it was written in the Book of Prophecy, so all she could do now was to beg for the Lord to let her go. If he would grant her request, she told him that she would do whatever he wanted, which surprised Nassar. The lady thought that she was getting through to him, judging by his reaction, since he was a kind and upright person. She had kept him at a distance, but they still have a relationship, so if she appeals to his compassion, maybe he would agree with her. However, she was a bit surprised to see a reaction she couldn't even understand. The young lord suddenly blushes after hearing that and asks her why she would try to test him by saying those words to him. He then helps her to sit down first while she is still a bit confused about what he just said. Since she was curious, Philomel asked him what he meant about what she said to make him react that way. But instead of answering, Nassar just apologized, as he was out of place for saying that. He then seriously told the princess that he couldn't accept her request to hide that from His Majesty. When she asked why, the young lord honestly said that he had already sent a magic message to the palace before they got on the carriage. Because of that, he apologizes to her again, as he just wants to send the good news that they found her as soon as possible, but he tells her that he still wants to help her. Since Nassar said that, he suggested to the princess to stay at the Aberdeen villa in Sengen. Then, he would report to His Majesty that she fled. Philomel doubted that the emperor would believe that, but even if he did, Nassar would become the fool in that situation. The young lord stated that he didn't mind being a fool at all, however, the princess said that she cared at all. She just didn't understand why he would even do that for her. Nassar was about to say the reason behind that, but his words wouldn't come out, which Philomel noticed. When she asked what he was going to say, the young man hesitated and covered his mouth as if he was too shy to say it in front of her. After that, it became quiet all of a sudden, as he really didn't have the courage to say it out loud. Because of that, the princess just agreed with his suggestion since things always get awkward whenever she is with Nassar. However, she had one condition, and it was that she wouldn't go to his villa, as she didn't want to be a burden, to which the young lord agreed. He then told her with a smile on his face that she should get some sleep since she looked really tired. The princess thought that Nassar should have already met Alencia after she left, and they must have started dating, so he shouldn't be disappointed in their relationship. However, she noticed the sad look behind that smile and wondered why. As the sun began to rise, the princess was sleeping so soundly inside their carriage. The young lord then fixed the coat for her so she couldn't feel any cold at all. While looking at her, a lot of thoughts came to his mind. He knew that she had put up a wall between them and that she distanced herself whenever he tried to get closer, but he still believed that if he stayed true to his feelings, he would be able to stand next to her one day. He thought that she probably wouldn't understand because the relationship they built so far had been based on an empty betrothal. The young lord kept looking at the sleeping princess and said that he realized too late that he was being immature. He then closed his eyes and hoped for her to have a good sleep and sweet dreams. It was already morning and the sun had already risen when they finally arrived at the place where Nassar was staying in Sengen. However, the princess seems like she didn't sleep at all because of the visible dark circles under her eyes. She was about to fall asleep, but she heard Nassar saying that he realized too late that he was being immature, so she woke right up after hearing that. The young lord just didn't notice that she was awake all along, even though her eyes were closed at that time. Suddenly, Nassar informed her that it was the hotel he was staying at in Sengen. Philomel thanked him for everything and said that she would never forget his kindness that day. Since the young lord knew that she was about to leave right away, he told her that he would tell them to prepare something simple for her to eat on the road and asked her not to refuse that as well. The princess thought that if she stayed there for too long, someone might recognize her, but she was hungry, so she accepted his offer. After that, Nassar ordered his men to tell the hotel kitchen to prepare something that was delicious, high in nutrition, easy to eat, and had a light and clean flavor. When Philomel heard that, she was surprised that he knew she liked foods that were not too rich. The young lord also instructed them to do something that could be made as soon as possible. The princess stayed silent for a moment while Nassar was asking her if there was anything else she needed. Also, he told her that he would do what he could to help her if she let him know the general direction of where she was headed. The real reason why she was silent was because she was gathering some courage to ask him if he could lend her some money. The young lord was taken aback by her sudden question, and it made him speechless for a second there. But he didn't take that long to respond and said that he didn't have money with him at that moment. On the other hand, Philomel was too shy to even look at her ex-fiancé's face. She didn't want to say it to him, but she needed to borrow messenger stones in order to call the magic tower, and she felt like the money she had left wouldn't be enough. She was left speechless when Nassar asked one of his subordinates to give all the money he had on him and said that he would repay him several times more when they returned. When Philomel told him that he didn't have to do that, the young man was surprised, as he had just shown her how direct he could be. That made the princess think if he was always like that and realized that there was much more she didn't know about him. While she was staring at him, Nassar was embarrassed as he let her see that side of him. However, Philomel couldn't help but think of the outcome if the two of them had been more open with each other. Suddenly, her thoughts got interrupted when one of Nassar's subordinates informed the lord that they had a problem. When he asked what it was, Sir Aaron pointed at the other side and said to look over there. He told him that His Majesty the Emperor was there, which greatly shocked Philomel. He was really there, but it seems like the princess was having a hard time processing it if it was really true. The subordinate said that His Majesty appeared out of thin air and strangely didn't have any attendants with him, but it was clearly the Emperor. While he was getting closer, he was asking the princess where she had been and that he had been searching for her. On the other hand, Philomel was getting nervous and wondered how he got there. She was having difficulty breathing as she realized that he must have used teleportation magic with divinity to find her. The princess kept thinking that it was already her end. The Emperor and Nassar noticed that there was something wrong with the princess, and they both asked her if she was okay. Suddenly, their worries got more serious when they saw Philomel was starting to lose her balance. They kept calling for her. However, she couldn't answer them because all she could think about was that she couldn't escape now. The princess felt strange because, aside from her vision getting worse, she also couldn't hear anything at all. Luckily, the Emperor was quick enough to catch the princess before she lost consciousness. They tried to call her multiple times, but she wouldn't wake up. Even when His Majesty shook her, she still wouldn't answer. Nassar's subordinate said that he would get a doctor from the hotel, but the young lord didn't react at all. He was in shock while staring at the princess as if he didn't care less about his surroundings. Suddenly, the Emperor uses his divine power to transport Philomel to the palace, as he couldn't wait any longer for the doctor to come. Nassar, who was also worried for the princess, asked His Majesty to bring him as well, but he didn't mind him as he was too focused on his magic. The princess, who had no idea what was happening, was still unconscious, while the young lord, who couldn't even do anything at all, tried to reach for her as they started to vanish into thin air. Just like that, the woman whom he eagerly searches for everywhere disappeared again right in front of his eyes. A moment later, his subordinate had arrived with the doctor from the hotel. However, despite his effort to get him quickly, the patient was already gone. Lord Nassar asked Sir Aaron if there were any Aberdeen magicians staying there who could perform a teleportation spell. The knight answered that all of them left that day at dawn, as His Grace, his father, sent a message that he needed them for something else. Because of what he said, he couldn't help but remember when his father told him to stop searching for the fake princess and focus on his new assignments, which made him furious. When Sir Aaron asked if he wanted him to search for other magicians in Sengen, Nassar answered no. Since he needed a skilled magician who could teleport to the capital at once, he would go to the magic tower instead. Meanwhile, at the magic tower, Legwin was scolding his eldest son, Lekshin, in a teasing manner because he couldn't bring Philomel just as he had promised him. Even though it was hard for him to accept that he had failed, Lekshin admitted that he had made a big mistake this time, as he never expected something would happen to the princess. If he knew, he wouldn't have let her leave like that. But he told his master that it was all his fault from the beginning. Just like his son, he hardly admitted his fault since he thought that everyone wants the same thing in the first place, and Philomel was not an exception. Lekshin couldn't help but sigh and said that it was the reason why his master needed to fix his way of thinking. He reminded him again that Philomel was a normal child of his, but before Lekshin could even finish his talk, someone interrupted them and called the master's name. 2 men suddenly arrived. The silver-haired guy asked about the magic tower being on emergency alert. That was why they were being summoned immediately. Their master, Legwin, was confused at that moment, so he wanted Lekshin to explain what he had told them, to which he answered that the 2 men wouldn't get there quickly unless he called them like that. After the 2 hurriedly went there from their mission, Lekshin explained the real reason why they were being called so suddenly, and it was about their half-sister, Philomel. When the eldest son went to get her, just as he promised to their master, she was already gone. Because of that, he asked around and found out that her belongings were still at the inn where she was staying. He thought that she was probably dragged to the capital after being captured by the authorities. The second son, Cadden, couldn't believe that people thought their sister was a criminal, so he suggested going there and rescuing her immediately. On the other hand, the third son, Jeremiah, was not interested at all since it was not an emergency for him, so he told them to leave him out of it. Their master knew it would be the quickest if he were the one to go get Philomel, but Lekshin also knew what he was planning to do, and it was to barge in there to kidnap the princess. He wouldn't let him do that, so he told them that they had to think from Phil's perspective as well, and that they were going against the Empire. Lekshin reminded their master that they have only maintained that peaceful relationship on the surface, even though they have no jurisdiction over the magic tower. Jeremiah didn't believe that statement since he heard that all of the Empire's requests for cooperation were rejected, but their master was not affected by his teasing and just said that he does what he wants. Cadden, who was worried for their sister, asked what they should do, as Philomel would be sent to prison. He even started to overthink and said that she was not going to eat properly and would become nothing but skin and bones. Since Legwin couldn't wait any longer, he decided to go there and see for himself what happened to his daughter. But before he went, he let Lekshin know that he was not going to listen to him if he tried to stop him from going. The eldest son was not going to do that because he knew he was the only one who could sneak past the palace's barrier undetected. He also added that they could get in another way. Jeremiah, who heard that, opposed it since he had just told them that he was not going. However, nobody listens to him. Lekshin then reminded their father that he couldn't go as himself and that he shouldn't do anything stupid while they were still not there. When Legwin asked what he should do instead, his eldest son answered that he should do something a normal person would like. Meanwhile, at the imperial palace, the emperor couldn't contain his frustration any longer. His daughter looks like she might die any second now, but the doctor is still not there. His aide tried to calm him down and said that he would be there soon. Looking at the princess, who was unconscious, he realized now that when His Majesty suddenly disappeared, that magic dispatch was all related to Her Highness. However, he knew that His Majesty was overreacting when he said that the princess was about to die. Finally, the servant outside the room announced the doctor's arrival. The moment he came, he immediately checked the princess's condition. From how she looked, the doctor said that she was suffering from exhaustion because of a lack of sleep. He added that it seems she was under immense stress in that state, but she would get better with plenty of rest. When he asked His Majesty if the princess experienced something shocking before she fainted, he couldn't give him an answer and stayed silent. Because of that, the aide speaks up and says that he would prepare a bed in another room so His Majesty could get some rest as well, while the doctor stated that he would make some medicine for the princess when she wakes up. However, the emperor insisted that he would stay by his daughter's side. When the aide heard that, he was worried for him, as he had already used teleportation magic twice just after he fainted not so long ago. But His Majesty still insisted on staying by the princess's side until she woke up. He then instructed him to go, to which the aide obediently obeyed, as there was nothing he could do now to persuade him. Even though it was concerning, he just let him be since he knew he wouldn't listen to him anyway. The emperor was not well, but he was so stubborn when it came to Her Highness Philomel. But still, the aide smiled when he looked at the princess, because he felt relieved that she had finally returned. A moment later, Philomel finally opened her eyes, and the first thing she thought about was the time. Her vision was still not clear, but she could smell the scent of fresh wood from where she was. While looking around, she remembered that it was what His Majesty used to smell like. But the moment she saw the emperor by his side, the princess quickly got up from her bed. From what she recalls, she knew she fainted. However, she had no idea what was going on or why His Majesty was there napping. Since she already got caught, it doesn't matter anymore to her where she was at the moment. Philomel had returned too soon from the place she avoided the most. She tried for 7 years, but she couldn't change her fate. Suddenly, her deep thoughts got interrupted when the emperor called her name. He had just woken up from a nap and asked how she was feeling, to which the princess replied that she was fine. She then wanted to move so he could sleep in the bed, but His Majesty refused it, as she needed to rest more. The emperor took that opportunity of them being alone to ask her why she had left the palace. Philomel honestly told him that it was because she was not his real daughter. His Majesty then wanted to know if she was the one who wrote that letter, to which she answered yes. After that, he followed it with a question about whether something had happened during that time when she wrote it, but the princess said no. The emperor couldn't understand at all why she left the palace, so he talked to her about the letter. He told the princess that she didn't have to leave that place because even if they didn't share the same blood, she was his daughter. To make her feel his sincerity, His Majesty stated that he would add her to the family register. That greatly surprised Philomel, as it was unexpected that the emperor would do that despite her not being his real daughter. She then inquired if he had no intention of ending her life, which shocked His Majesty. He got suddenly worried as to why she got that idea, so he asked why he would do that. The lady answered that he was searching for her because he wanted to punish her. However, the emperor said that it was Catherine, her real mother, who switched her with Alencia, not her. Even so, the lady told him that she was not the child whom the empress gave birth to. Unexpectedly, His Majesty stated that it didn't matter whether the empress conceived her or not because he had always considered her his daughter. Philomel couldn't understand him at all, and wondered if she was really that important to him. She still remembers what he thought about her before, when she overheard him saying that he wanted her never to bother him, as if she didn't exist. The only reason she tried to look good to him was for her safety because she could never be his real daughter, no matter how hard she tried. However, she thought that maybe there could be a possibility that it would be different if she became his real daughter. The princess wondered if that was what she really wanted. When the emperor noticed that she was silent, he asked her if she had no interest in becoming a part of his family. Even his real daughter, Alencia, said that she would like to get to know her if she returned. His Majesty promised that he would not be biased, so it would be okay to be part of his family if she didn't mind that. Philomel thought that it would be reasonable to accept his offer at that moment, as it would protect her life from danger, and she could just leave again after His Majesty loses interest in her. All she had to do was say that she accepted. However, she was having a hard time answering him and hesitated for a while. The moment he heard her answer, he was in great shock, as he didn't expect her to say no to his offer. Philomel seriously looked at his eyes and stated that she didn't want to be his daughter. A moment later, after their conversation, a maid delivered the princess's meal to that room. Another servant tends to her and says that he will prepare a small table so she can eat in bed. Despite her refusal, as she could eat at the table, the attendant insisted on doing it because they knew she needed a total rest at that moment. After preparing it, they excused themselves so the lady could eat comfortably. However, she felt like they were treating her like a sick patient. Looking at the food served before her, she suddenly felt hungry, as the last thing she had was that soup and bread yesterday. She couldn't help but think that a person's mind was so deceptive, because even though she never wanted to come back there, her hand just went toward the food so easily. When she looked at her clothes, she thought that she might as well change and wash them, as they were already dirty. Suddenly, Philomel felt conflicted as to what she should do now after saying all of that to His Majesty. Aside from that, she also needs to find the ring that was taken from her. If she couldn't get it, she thought that she should just tell the emperor the truth. However, it was hard for her to do that given their situation. Suddenly, Elencia just burst inside the room, assuming her father was there. The princess wanted to have a dice game with His Majesty, but she saw Philomel instead, which froze the two ladies. After seeing her, a little disappointment was seen from Elencia, but Philomel didn't mind it at all. The princess then changed her mood and looked excited when she greeted the lady. When she asked when she got there, Philomel answered that she had just arrived that morning. Elencia shared how worried she was when she heard that the lady was missing. However, Phil felt awkward, as she didn't want to run into her looking like that. It was strangely uncomfortable for her, and she thought that maybe it was because they had switched positions since they last met. Suddenly, the princess happily asked her if she could play dice with her. Since Philomel had nothing to do anyway, she agreed to it. Before starting the game, Her Highness asked if she had played dice before, to which she answered that she had not, but she knew the gist of the game. The princess explains that she needs to roll the dice and do what is written on the space it lands on, and the first person to climb from peasant to emperor is the winner. She shared that she has always enjoyed that game, but now she plays with her father, the emperor, and her nanny. When Philomel heard that, she was confused as to who it was, so the princess told her that it was the one she grew up with. Elencia thought that it would be nice for her if she saw her again. However, Philomel suddenly got annoyed just by thinking of that old woman. After a while, it was now her turn to roll the dice. She couldn't help but think that His Majesty and his daughter really played that game. When she was younger, she used to watch the maids play, and she always wanted to join. But eventually, she was so busy walking on eggshells that she never got the chance. At that time, she pretended that she was not interested in it, but the truth was, she really wanted to try it. The card she got says, "You fortunately caught the eye of the imperial family and became a maid." After reading it, the princess suddenly asked her if she wanted to be a maid. Philomel thought that maybe it was because of that card she got, so she told the princess that she was a maid at that moment, and it was her turn now. However, she was surprised when Her Highness told her that she was being serious and asked her again if she wanted to be her maid. She told the lady that there was so much she didn't know yet, so she would like her to teach her since she was so smart. But more importantly, she was worried about her. The princess's demeanor changed, and Philomel couldn't help but be surprised as she was asking her to be a maid all of a sudden. Her Highness even told her that she has nowhere to go now, so she could just live at the palace with her as the princess's maid. Philomel got worried as she thought that her future had already changed when she was offered to join the family. It was as if her fate was going back to how it was because she rejected His Majesty's offer. Her body suddenly got cold because becoming Elencia's maid was exactly what happened in the book Elencia, the Imperial Princess. Meanwhile, at the Emperor's office, His Majesty was taking care of some of his work, but it seems like he was bothered by something. When he remembered Philomel saying that she didn't want to be his daughter, he stopped writing. She told him that after she matured, she never thought of him as her father. Maybe he considered her his daughter, but living there was hell for Philomel. She even told His Majesty what he wished before, and that she should act like she was a dead rat, so she simply tried to do as he wanted. The emperor was surprised when he heard that while the lady told him to let her go now. He didn't expect that from her and got nervous all of a sudden. He had no idea that she had heard him saying those words before to his aide. His Majesty told her that it must have been weighing on her heart this whole time, to which she answered yes. Philomel was listening to him intently while he apologized for what he said before. He wanted to explain it, but he knew that anything he said would sound like an excuse. The emperor regretted that and said that he would apologize properly another day, but he begged her to reconsider being put in the family register, which surprised Philomel. She opposed it, as she had already told him that she didn't want to be his daughter. However, His Majesty asked her to stay just for 1 year. After a year, he wouldn't stop her from going wherever she said she would go, and if there was anything she wanted to do, he would support her as much as he could. But if she didn't want to stay for 1 year, he asked if 10 months was okay for her, but Philomel tried to talk to him. However, it seems like the emperor didn't want to listen to her shorten the period by 8 months. Still, the lady had something to say, but His Majesty wouldn't let her and said that he couldn't go any lower than 6 months. Philomel told him that the duration was not the problem, but the emperor was still stubborn and lowered it to 3 months. He didn't go any shorter than that and told her to think about it while she rested. Since her recovery was more important, he excused himself, leaving the lady speechless. Just thinking about it made the emperor sigh, as anyone could tell he was running away from her. When he thought about the 3 months he told Phil, he suddenly heard noises outside his study. It was Princess Alencia who was dragging Philomel and said that she didn't have to worry, as her father would do it if she told him. The lady insisted many times that she didn't want to, but the princess didn't listen to her, so Phil thought that she was impossible to talk to and noticed how strong she was. Alencia was confident that her father would listen to her, so she told the lady that she didn't need to worry at all. The emperor reminded the princess again to knock before she entered and asked what was going on with the two of them. When Philomel was about to speak, Alencia told her father to let the lady become her maid. That surprised His Majesty, while the princess continued to say that Philomel wouldn't have to leave the palace if she became a maid, and the work wouldn't be that hard. Her father asked if the lady agreed to it, to which she answered not yet and said that she would obey if he allowed it. The emperor told his daughter that there was nothing he could do if she didn't agree and that she shouldn't force Philomel to be her maid. He also added that no matter how she was raised, she was a princess now. She couldn't just bring him a ridiculous problem and expect him to easily agree. Philomel looked at the princess as she was about to start crying, as it seemed like His Majesty was scolding her. Alencia then apologized and said that she just felt bad for the lady because of what happened to her. The emperor told him not to cry, and her apology shouldn't be for him since he was not the person involved. The princess seemed like she didn't want to do it, so Philomel interrupted the two and said that there was no need for her apology since she made a mistake, just because she was too worried about her. At the back of her mind, the lady felt some relief that His Majesty didn't give in to what the princess wanted. His Majesty then told his daughter that she didn't have to worry because if he brought Philomel into the family, she would remain in the palace. That surprised the princess, as she didn't know that he could do that. She then asked her father if he was planning to adopt the lady, to which he answered yes. However, that would only be possible if Philomel agrees to it. The emperor told them that it was getting late, so the two of them should turn in for the night. But before they went their way, Alencia happily asked Philomel if they were sisters now. She even apologizes to her, as she didn't even know that there was an option like that. The princess added that they should be wonderful sisters to each other, but Phil didn't say anything to that. Alencia wanted to do something before she left the room, so she called His Majesty's attention. She told him to come a little closer to her, which the emperor obediently obeyed. Then the next thing she did was to give him a light kiss on His Majesty's cheek, which surprised him. The princess said that it was a good night kiss, which Philomel hardly believed that she did that to the emperor. Alencia left the room happily while her father froze at what she did to him. When the princess was gone, His Majesty said that he didn't think he could get used to his daughter's friendliness. Philomel turned to look at him and was a little surprised, as the emperor was not as affectionate as in the book. When she was about to discuss the matter about the family register that His Majesty was talking about earlier, he suddenly stood up from his chair and changed the topic. He told Philomel that her old room had been prepared, and he was sure that she would find it comfortable, which confused the lady. It was not what she wanted to talk about, so when His Majesty started to leave, she tried to have a conversation with him. However, he didn't even listen to her and just walked away, leaving the lady dumbfounded. That night, when Philomel was getting ready for bed, Countess Delise, her personal maid, hurriedly went inside the room to see her. She was so worried for her, but the lady just greeted her, as she couldn't bring herself to explain everything to her. The countess hugs the lady and asks why she left like that without saying a word to her. Philomel apologized for it, but the countess told her that she didn't need to, as she was just happy that she was back now. When she disappeared, she was so worried that something bad had happened to her. Since she returned now, she felt relieved and was really happy to see her again, which made Philomel smile. Suddenly, their joyful reunion was interrupted when the two of them heard something from the window. They heard scratching, so the countess said that it might be some stray cat that sneaks into the palace. When she opened it to check what it was, she was startled as the cat suddenly went inside the room. The countess asked if the princess was all right, but she didn't answer her, as she was so focused on staring at it. She found that thing so beautiful in her white furry hair and asked if it was really a cat. The two of them went closer to it, and the countess couldn't help but be amazed, as she had never seen a silver cat before, while Philomel thought it was pretty. The lady didn't know how it got that far into the palace, but she said that it does have a good eye while nuzzling it. She then asked the countess if she thinks it has an owner since it doesn't avoid people, to which she answered that she was not sure and said that if it did, they must be searching for it. The countess asked if they should look after it until they find its owner, which Philomel agreed to. However, she told her that she didn't know when she would leave again, which surprised the countess. The old woman wonders why she couldn't just stay, but the lady told her that she was not a princess, so she couldn't stay there forever. Philomel shared the intention of His Majesty to add her to the family register, but she declined, so he told her to think about it. When the Countess heard that, she told her that she should accept it, and abruptly shared how the Emperor tirelessly searched for her. Upon realizing what she said, she immediately apologized to the lady, as she had overstepped and it was her decision after all. But Philomel told her not to apologize, as she knew she was only thinking of her. She even thanks the old woman for her concern. The lady acted like she didn't care, but it got stuck in her mind when she heard that His Majesty was tirelessly searching for her. The silver cat looked at her as if it knew something was bothering her. She then asked Countess Delise why she was still awake when she should be resting already, to which she answered that she was all right, as she brought something to help pass the time as she spent that night there. A moment later, it was time for them to sleep. The cat was sleeping soundly beside the fireplace, while Philomel was still wide awake, as she couldn't fall asleep because she had so much on her mind. She thought that aside from her uncertain future, things were a little different, including meeting her real father, the truth about her birth, and even Emperor Eustace and Alencia. When she was thinking about how she should treat them and how she feels something about Alencia, the Countess noticed her and asked if she was having trouble falling asleep. The lady answered that there was just so much she had on her mind and reassured the old woman that she really wouldn't go anywhere, so she could get some rest now. Countess Delise then said that she would stay until she fell asleep after hearing that. She also told her that she probably wouldn't be able to help her much, but she could at least listen to whatever's on her mind. She even told her that they say telling someone what was on her mind relieves the burden that was in her heart. However, Philomel couldn't talk about most of the things she was thinking about, but she appreciated the thought. So, instead of sharing what was bothering her, she wanted to know if something had happened between His Majesty and Alencia, because she noticed that the two seemed awkward with one another. But the Countess was confused since she already expected that from them. The silver cat opened its one eye as if it caught its attention when the Countess said that they may be father and daughter, but they only met a few days ago. That confused the lady, as they should have some sort of unspoken blood bond. Countess Delise called Philomel Her Highness, but she corrected it immediately to Miss Philomel. She asked the lady if she still remembered the story she told her about her daughter, to which she answered yes and said that she was the one who went to study abroad and just returned. The Countess stated that her daughter used to say she was going to marry someone like her father, but now they were estranged. It was awkward between the two of them now, and they probably wouldn't say a word to each other if she were not there. While listening to her, Philomel thought that it was the first time hearing about Countess Delise's family. She then continued to say that the relationships between parents and children weren't any different from other ones. Both sides need time and effort to maintain a healthy relationship. The Countess then said that His Majesty and Her Highness Alencia were just like her husband and daughter. When the lady heard that, she had no idea about it. All she knew was that, in the book she read, they had a special father-daughter bond as soon as they met, and that was something he and she never had. Even though she always hoped for it, Philomel already knew she and Emperor Eustace never had a blood bond. Even though she shares blood with Catherine and Legwin, they didn't have that bond either. They were the same as Eustace. Because the former emperor was heartless and forced his children to compete for power, the current one had never felt a deep affection for anybody before meeting Isabella. That was why the lady was skeptical about him thinking of her as his daughter. It feels like he just liked her because she was obedient. Looking back, she thought that every day was like walking on the edge of a cliff. She had no one to rely on, and she was terrified that the ground would give way at any second, so she never opened her heart to anyone. While pondering those, she thought she had hidden it well this whole time. She pushed down her feelings and wore a mask until she was just a shell. Once she started, she couldn't stop herself. When she remembered saying to His Majesty that she never thought of him as her father, she thought it was strange, but she felt rather relieved after throwing away that 7 years' worth of effort. However, she couldn't stop her tears now, as the lady couldn't understand why her mind was such a mess. Suddenly, the silver cat noticed the lady was crying, so it looked at her as if it were concerned. Not only the silver cat but also the Countess saw Philomel in that state, so she called her attention. She suggested staying at her house if she intended to really leave the palace. However, the lady was concerned about her job as a maid. The Countess said that there was no point in her staying without Philomel there. When she heard that, she was confused, as she thought that the old woman was going to be Alencia's maid. Countess Delise smiled and couldn't believe that she looked like someone who would switch sides easily for the lady. She then asked Philomel to promise her one thing, and it was to leave without saying goodbye again. She even told her that she could just tell her and be on her way, which surprised the lady. After hearing that, she now realized that she was not really alone. She was the one who distanced herself because she expected the Countess to take Alencia's side. That made the lady happy a little inside while agreeing with the old woman and promising that she would do what she said. When Philomel asked herself if there was more that she gave up because she was scared, the picture of Nassar came to her mind, as he was also there for her. A moment later, the lady finally fell asleep after she talked and cried with the Countess. When it was finally quiet, Legwin suddenly showed himself to talk and get his daughter. However, when he was asking the lady if she was asleep, there was no reply from her. He even told her that he came there to get her. Before he could really wake Philomel, he suddenly remembered what Lection told him, that they had to think about his plan from his daughter's perspective, and reminded him not to do anything stupid and to wait quietly until they got there. Because of that, he controlled himself and said that there was nothing he could do, so he shouldn't wake her up, and besides, it doesn't seem like his daughter was trapped in that place, so it should be fine for him to wait. Looking at the lady's face while sleeping, he thought that he would understand when he saw her again, but he didn't know the emotion he was feeling at that moment. Legwin was thinking deeply, as he still didn't understand what that unpleasant and uncomfortable feeling was. When he thought about it, he had never felt that with his other children since it was just a master and student relationship. The Magic Tower's master wonders if it was because Philomel was different, as she barely has any magic. But the amount of Estelian she had didn't have anything to do with her personality, since she only checked to see if she was really his child. The only strange thing he noticed was that she got angry at him for not remembering who her mother was. He then thought that he never cared about her, but he did know who she was. Legwin suddenly remembers his experiences, and based on his observation, most people who fell under the category of ordinary and normal were afraid of him. It took a while for him to understand other people's actions, words, and expressions, but he knew what fear looked like in their eyes. However, he couldn't say that it was only because of Estelian, because something similar had happened before. When he was still young, outside the restaurant where he was working, the owner was scolding him for hurting their customer without knowing who it was. She even told him that he should be grateful that she gave a job to a poor orphan like him. The young man couldn't understand why the owner was angry, as the man was the one who started it. However, the lady took that as him admitting it, so she fired the kid. Young Legwin told her that she didn't understand at all since the man hit him first. He asked why he couldn't do the same. He also asked if she was worried they were going to retaliate, even though they said she was a peasant who pretended to have connections with the nobles. The lady couldn't say anything about that, so the young man commented with a serious look that it would have been better to make sure they could never come back. When the lady heard that, she suddenly got frightened, as she couldn't believe he could say such things when he was still so young. Legwin continued to say that even if his size and strength were at a disadvantage, if he aimed for their weak spot, he had a chance. That scared the owner even more, so she told him not to come near her again. They looked at him as if they couldn't understand him, so after seeing that over and over again, he realized that there was something different about him. Compared to that, Philomel didn't show a hint of fear, and since she was his child, he didn't think she would care about her relationship with him. Based on his research, family relationships were special to ordinary people, even though family was just people who resembled each other. They need and understand each other, regardless of who they are. While looking at her, he said that her brothers didn't really need someone who was not ordinary like him, but she was different. Things might have also been different if she were at the Magic Tower from the beginning. Since that was not the case, he had no choice but to just watch over her like she was told to. That was what he was thinking last night. However, the next morning, a commotion happened as an old maid was ordering Philomel to get out of there. It was her nanny before who always scolded her and even shouted at his daughter, saying that she was brave to come back there. The maid continued to say that Philomel might have tricked His Majesty, but she was not falling for it, so she ordered her to leave instantly. Alencia, on the other hand, tried her best to stop the old woman. The lady calmly replied to her that she was going to leave anyway, so she should stop making such a scene. However, the maid still continued and told her that the poor princess had never seen her own father until now because of her and her mother. Countess Delise had to step in as she was getting out of line, so she told her to stop already. The lady couldn't help but feel sad since she had still taken care of her when she was young, so she couldn't believe she was attacking her like that. It made her wonder if her presence only causes trouble wherever she goes. The nanny then confidently told the countess to stay out of it and asked if she knew who she was, since she had been at the palace for a long time. When she was about to say more to brag about herself, suddenly something pushed her like there was some kind of wind, which surprised everyone. She hurt her back and asked for someone's help, but they were all too startled to act since it happened so quickly. When Lady Philomel asked what she was doing, the old woman accused her of pushing her. The lady asked why she was blaming her when she was far away. Countess Delesse told the nanny not to blame it on someone else when she fell on her own. However, the old woman insisted that she wouldn't just fall and asked Her Highness if someone had pushed her, but the princess shook her head as she didn't see anyone. She then told her nanny that it was more important for her to get up at that moment since it was not proper for her to stay on the ground, but she couldn't stand up, as she must have hurt her back. Because of that, the princess suggested calling a servant to help the old woman instead. Philomel, on the other hand, heard the cat's voice. When she looked at it, the cat was stretching its body, but she noticed something about it. It has a satisfied look on its face when the cat goes back to sleep again. Philomel then turned to look at the nanny, who was getting some help from the servants, and wished they would just hurry up and leave already. When the old woman finally got up, she commented on how mortifying her situation was and added that Lady Philomel needs to be in prison just like her mother, which surprised the lady. Even though she didn't say that last part out loud, Philomel still heard it clearly and was confused. She knew she had heard her saying that her biological mother was in prison, so it made her wonder if Catherine was still alive. A moment later, His Majesty's aide came to Lady Philomel to apologize on behalf of the nanny. Countess Delesse asked what he was thinking, letting someone like her back into the palace. The aide thought that she would have reflected on her mistakes and said that he takes full responsibility for making the wrong decision. Since her actions were unacceptable, the countess seriously looked at him and wanted him to dismiss that old woman immediately. The aide agreed to her quickly and said that he would tell her right away. Lady Philomel wanted to go with him, so she told the countess that she should go now. However, she was worried for the lady, as she could hear some verbal abuse again. But the lady insisted that she would be fine since the nanny was not one to quietly walk away, and besides, it gave her something to do. Suddenly, the cat happily went closer to her as if it wanted to come with them as well. However, the lady told the cat that she appreciated the thought but wouldn't allow it, so she told the cat to wait patiently there. After saying that, she felt embarrassed, as there was no way a cat would understand what a person was saying. But to their surprise, it actually obeyed her and went back to its couch, which made the countess comment on how clever the cat was. The aide noticed it and asked the lady if she had a cat, to which she answered no and said that she was just looking after it while she found its owner. She added that she didn't want to leave it outside because it was cold. After saying that, she invited him to go already, but before they could go, he told her how she has a warm heart. He then said that he saw the nanny go with Princess Alencia earlier, so he would escort the lady. Before they left, she took a quick look at the cat and thought that she would just keep it if its owner didn't show up while she was still at the palace. A moment later, Philomel and the Emperor's aide went to Princess Alencia's room, where that old woman was. When the aide informed the nanny, she couldn't accept that they were kicking her out. She was making a fuss as they were being cruel and even suggested that he let her die. However, the aide told the old nanny that she should have gotten her act together when she got a second chance. He even said that if he tells His Majesty about the scene she caused that day, he doubts he would let her leave quietly. When the old woman heard that, she commented that the Emperor wouldn't do that to the late Empress's nanny, but the aide dared her to check it right away, as he could report to him at once. He also reminds her to apologize to Ms. Philomel. While they were talking, the lady was wondering since earlier where the nanny had gone, but it turns out she was in Alencia's room. Giving up her own bed was very generous of the princess. Since she had no choice, the old woman apologized to Philomel and said that she was wrong. That surprised the lady, as she thought she would be more stubborn. Suddenly, Princess Alencia said that she feels bad for the nanny, as she couldn't even move after hurting her back, and worried about her if she left the palace in that state. She added that they should at least let her stay there until her back gets better. When the old woman heard that, her tears showed up, and she told the princess that she didn't have to do that for her. Her Highness then turned to look at Philomel and said that she would explain things to her father, so she asked if she could just forgive the nanny. The aide interrupted the princess and told her that no matter what her circumstances were, that was not possible. However, Her Highness's expression became cold as she reprimanded Count Poland to stay out of it, as she was asking Philomel, since she was the one who was hurt by the nanny. The lady noticed that the atmosphere changed with Alencia's words. In that situation, it makes it look like she was the one kicking out the nanny and not the count. If Philomel declined, then she would look like she was a bad person who was more than happy to drive out an injured old lady. She thought that she was going to leave soon anyway, so her reputation didn't really matter, but she couldn't stand it, so she told the princess that it was fine and that they should do as she said, which surprised Her Highness. The lady added that if the nanny agrees to leave as soon as she recovers, then she wouldn't oppose. But she suggested another option. Before saying it, she first asked the old lady if she remembered when she tumbled down the stairs and broke her leg when she was around 8 years old, to which she answered yes, even though she was not sure. Philomel asked if she also remembers being by her side and taking care of her the whole time, to which she immediately answered yes, and couldn't believe she remembered that, as she spoon-fed her and even carried her on her back. After hearing that, the lady thought that she would never forget that because it was hell hearing the nanny nagging every single day until her leg got better. The Count was confused as to what the lady was trying to say and what plans to do, but before he could even ask her, Philomel said that it was really nice to have the old lady by her side when she was in pain, so she suggested the princess do the same for her. That surprised both the nanny and her highness, while the lady continued to say that as long as she tells the princess what to do, there is no need for her to move around. Philomel stated that her highness said she didn't know enough about the palace, and her bed was big enough, so she could sleep next to her, like the time the nanny took care of the lady. The princess was cornered and was hesitating to do that, but the old lady interrupted her. She commented that it does make sense, as her highness's mother, Empress Isabella, also grew up learning from her. The princess told her that she would recover more quickly in a quieter place on her own, but the old lady said that she would be fine, as she didn't mind her back healing slowly. She also told her highness that she would very much like to be there in her room for the princess. Philomel already expected that, as the nanny was going to do whatever it takes to cling on to Alencia because she didn't want to leave, so she told her highness to allow it if the nanny thinks it was a good idea. The lady thought that Alencia wouldn't be able to refuse because she was so kind. When she was hesitating, the old lady acted pitiful and said that if the princess thinks she is that useless, then she will probably end up on the street when she gets even a tiny bit better. Since her highness had no choice, as everyone was waiting for her answer, she agreed to let the nanny stay there with her, which made the old lady happy, and she commented that even though she grew up with commoners, imperial blood still runs through her veins. Since the problem was solved in her way, the lady then invited the Count to go out. Before going, the nanny happily said that she would weed out the princess's common ways with her precise guidance. Just hearing that sends chills down her spine. Philomel took one last look at Alencia and thought that she was still naive about people because she had not experienced enough. With that worried look on her face, the lady knew that she would soon want to kick the nanny out herself. As she walks out of the room, Philomel has a satisfied expression and feels a little bad, but there was no choice as she did that for Alencia's own good. While they were walking in the hallway, the Count asked if Princess Philomel was sure that she was okay. He added that he was in awe of her mercy but worried as it put her in a difficult position. However, the lady said that it was fine since the nanny would only stay in that room now, she probably wouldn't run into her again. She also reminds the Count that she was not a princess anymore, which surprised him. He then asked her if His Majesty didn't tell the lady about putting her in the family register, to which she answered that he did, but she declined. When the Count was surprised to hear that and asked her why, the lady suddenly remembered that she had had a similar conversation yesterday. Since she had no intention of telling him the real reason why, she just told him that no matter what His Majesty says, it didn't make sense. She then asked if there had been any cases in history of someone like her being added to the Bellarov family register. Aside from that, the nobles wouldn't have stayed quiet if she had accepted his offer, which made the Count speechless as she had a point. The lady knew that it was a flimsy excuse, but it was true. Becoming a part of the imperial family was extremely political. When there was no direct descendant who would become the emperor, a distant relative was accepted. When the imperial family had no one suitable who could be wed to another nation to build political ties, only highly reputable nobles had been added to the Bellarov family register before. As someone who was not a noble, being accepted would be difficult. It might be possible if Eustace were willing to make sweeping changes to the nobility, but there was no way that would happen. Suddenly, she was interrupted in her thoughts when the Count stated that there actually had been a similar case. The 7th emperor adopted the daughter of his knight who died protecting him, so she couldn't say she was not worthy. When the lady heard about the 7th emperor, she knew it was from 800 years ago. She was also sure she had learned all about him in history class, so she asked him if he was the one named emperor after he passed away, meaning he was posthumously crowned. She added that he was not even an emperor when he was alive, so of course there was not much objection to him doing that. The Count anxiously said that it was true, but it was still honored. The lady told him that his argument was weak at best, but the Count reasoned that he had been up for 3 days researching that. When Philomel asked why he did that, he answered that after she said it was unprecedented, His Majesty told him to find a case at all costs. He even told him to make one up if he couldn't find anything, The emperor wouldn't let him go home, and it has already been 5 days since he last saw his baby daughter. When the lady heard that, she thought that it was definitely like him, but there was a limit to being stubborn, as that was going a bit too far. Because of that, she thought that she would have to speak with His Majesty before Count Poland starts coming up with false history. When he was complaining that he wanted to see his little princess so badly already, Philomel thought that there was something she had to do before meeting the emperor. She didn't hesitate to tell the count about it. She apologized to him for asking for a favor at that moment. That suddenly raised his curiosity as she suddenly looked serious, so he asked what it was. The lady told him that she wants to meet with Catherine, her birth mother, who is currently in prison. It was so quiet where that woman was located at the moment, alone, and no one had ever visited her. With a chain on both of her hands, she thought that she was going to die soon in that place. Catherine knew that there was no way His Majesty would forgive her, so her death would most likely be brutal and painful. After everything she had done to her friend and her child, she thought that it was how she should die. Just thinking about her friend Isabella, the late empress, she wondered where things went wrong. It was 29 years ago when the two of them met in a small village near Fala's mountain. A man told the 8-year-old Catherine to introduce herself to the daughter of the lord there. When she greeted the 8-year-old Isabella, the young lady seemed to be happy to meet her. She even suddenly held her hand and asked for her name while introducing herself as Isabella. After hearing that her name was Catherine, she apologized immediately for grabbing her hand like that and explained that she got a bit excited since that place was so remote that there was no one her age there. The young Catherine was moved by her words and knew that there was something special about Isabella the first time she met her. That was probably why they were able to become friends even though she was merely the daughter of a merchant. Time passed quickly and she stayed by the lady's side. One day she noticed some knights in front of Isabella's house. At that time she thought that the two of them would remain equals in their relationship. However, they began to drift apart the day the newly crowned emperor visited her friend's land. It was the moment that Catherine first saw His Majesty, and she fell in love after she laid her eyes on him. Time passed by again quickly, and one day her friend Isabella informed her that she had agreed to marry the emperor. Because of that announcement, she also told Catherine that she would be leaving that place soon. Even though she was happy congratulating her friend, in the back of her mind she already knew it would happen. She already accepted the fact that her position did not match His Majesty's and that the two of them would not end up together. While Isabella was telling her that she still couldn't believe she would be marrying the emperor and thought that she was being too ambitious, Catherine was thinking of something else. She remembered her friend's face that day, and when she saw the two of them meeting later, contrary to the rumors that said he was a cold and merciless, bloody tyrant, his face was completely different. That face of his made Catherine think that she was the one who fell for him first. A second later, she felt a little guilty for thinking that way, as she should be congratulating her friend properly. Catherine was surprised when Isabella called her name as she was lost in her own thoughts. She then told her that she was wondering if she could make her an offer. Without saying more, Isabella asked Catherine if she was okay going to the imperial palace with the lady. After that, she immediately informed her family about it. Her father was very happy while saying that becoming the empress's maid would bring great honor to their family. On the other hand, her brother William appeared and heard the news as well. He told his sister that it was important to keep good friends. Catherine looked at him and thought that her brother usually looks at her like she is an annoyance, so she guessed that he was glad to hear that she was leaving. William then suggested she ask Her Majesty to introduce her to some eligible bachelors. Then their father said that it was thanks to her that members of the Hound's family could lift their heads up higher. When Catherine heard her father say that he was proud of her, she wondered if hearing that from him started making her feel terrible. Her father was a merchant through and prioritized benefits over anything else. Her brother William kept her at a distance because he was scared she would take what was his. But compared to her, Isabella was very different. The lady even apologized to her for suggesting she come with her, as she just didn't want them to be apart. Since Catherine has nothing to lose, she happily said goodbye to her father, and thought that she would be much happier being next to her one and only friend. However, that happiness didn't last long. Life in the palace was comfortable, and it was all thanks to Isabella's sweet kindness. Sometimes she was compensated too generously for a maid. The empress gave Catherine some clothes that were originally given by the emperor to her. Even though she hesitated at first, as she knew who it came from, Catherine still accepted it. His Majesty, on the other hand, let her wife treat her that way because she was her friend. However, her kindness and generosity got to her head, and she ended up wanting more and became drunk off the comforts that she was allowed. In her mind, the clothes came from His Majesty, and she thought that it meant he would accept her already. Catherine knew that emperors usually have concubines, and there were also rumors that His Majesty's mother was a commoner, so she thought that status might not be important to him. She didn't want to take her friend's place, but as long as she could receive even just a little bit of love and stand next to the person she cares about, she was already satisfied with that. Because of her delusion, she took the courage to tell the emperor that she didn't mind being a mistress, as she just wanted to be his woman. Catherine even wore the clothes that she thought His Majesty gave to her, but the room was filled with silence after she said that. The lady was in great shock when the emperor coldly asked her to repeat her words. The consequence of a foolish girl betraying her friend was obviously receiving the rage and scorn of the man who loved that friend. After that moment, Catherine runs as fast as she can and as far as she can without knowing where to go. She had no idea what to do or how she could undo what she had done while trying to remember the emperor's words. He told her not to show her face in front of them ever again because if she did, he would end her life. While running, Catherine couldn't stop her tears, as she didn't even know how to apologize to Isabella. She had nowhere to go, so she came back to her hometown. But if she returns home, she doesn't know what to say, as her father and her brother William would be furious. Suddenly, the lady stopped running when she heard a howl behind her and got scared. When she turned around to look at what it was, there she saw a wolf that was ready to devour her. Catherine couldn't move her body, as a wolf couldn't be that big. It made her wonder if it was a monster. She had no idea why it was there, but more importantly, it was not alone. She thought that she might be going to die there. Despite knowing the danger she was in currently, she didn't run at all and accepted her fate, as that situation might be better for her. Catherine knew she had done something unforgivable, so that ought to happen. She was ready to give her life to those monsters when someone suddenly appeared from behind. That man in a cloak even asked the lady if she had a death wish. After that, he just stepped on that huge monster easily with one foot, as if it were just an insect. The man then said that he came all the way there because some monsters were causing a racket. Catherine was so surprised that she couldn't answer him properly when he asked if she wasn't even thinking of running earlier. The man didn't wait for her reply, as he actually didn't really care what was going on with her, and just told her to stand there quietly. Because for him, it would be a waste to die after he went through the trouble of saving her life. The man then lifts his hand while creating a circular light in front of him that looks like magic. After that, it became even bigger and went straight to the top of those monsters that were ready to eat them alive. Catherine was in great shock when she saw it and wondered what it was, while the man was smiling as he closed his fist. The lady didn't know what was happening as the magic circle attacked those monsters that caused an explosion. A moment later, all of those giant wolves were killed and burned. That made Catherine realize that the man was the magic tower master. However, she was confused about what brought someone like him to that rural village, so she asked him about it. He answered that there was no special reason and added that they always pester him to work when he is at the tower, so he left for some fresh air. The man swears to the lady that he was not slacking off as he was taking a justified break. Catherine then thanked him for saving her and asked how she could repay that debt. He told her that there was no need for that, but if she really wanted to, he had a proposition for her. He added that he was not forcing her, so she didn't have to do it while bringing a document with his magic. When she was getting confused, the man explained that he was recruiting women to have his children and asked her if she would like to apply, as the more the merrier. After their encounter, the lady went straight to their home, and as she expected, her father was furious. He wanted to know the reason why she resigned from her job as the Empress's maid. Catherine just answered that she couldn't stay there anymore while apologizing to him. But still, her father wanted to know what exactly happened there. However, before she could even give him an answer, her brother showed up, interrupting them. He told their father that it was obvious that the lady had made some sort of mistake. William couldn't believe that was all she had to say after leaving for just 2 or 3 months. He then told his sister that it was her choice not to tell them, but if their family had to face the consequences of her actions, he wouldn't forgive her. Before leaving, he murmured that he thought he would benefit from having ties to the Empress, but his sister was impatient and useless. Her family poured criticism and disappointment onto her when she returned home, and Catherine's mind was so filled with embarrassment and regret. The lady thought that she was really useless and she had nothing left at that moment. However, even if she was the most useless person in the world, she thought that as long as she had the child of the most powerful magician, it would give her some worth. That was when she started to turn to vicious self-loathing as she sought comfort. It was also how she ended up applying for the experiment at the magic tower. When she got there, a magician informed the lady that she was not allowed to speak with anyone about the experiment aside from those involved. That was why they recommended that she stay at the tower until the results came out, but Catherine apologized, as her family didn't know that she was there. After hearing that, the magician then said that there was nothing they could do about that, but she must return if her situation changes, while handing her a tiny bottle. The lady thought that instead of trying to become someone of worth, she was weak and wanted to live vicariously through her child. If her child were also one of Legwin's, the magic tower master, she thought that he or she would also be a great being. Just because her child was outstanding didn't mean she would be as well, but it was already too late by the time she realized that. To make matters worse, her father found out that she was pregnant by an unknown man, and in his rage, he moved to the capital, leaving her behind. From that day on, she was no longer part of the Hound family. After time passed, Catherine's due date approached, and Isabella, who was near the end of her pregnancy, came to visit her. The Empress happily greeted her, as it had been so long since they last saw each other, and said that she missed her. When Her Majesty stated that she heard Catherine had moved far away because something came up and was surprised to hear that she was there, the lady thought that Isabella really didn't know anything. Catherine then apologized for leaving without telling her and asked why she was there. The Empress answered that it was just her at the palace at that moment, so she missed that place so much. She added that she really wanted to have her child in her hometown, and she barely got permission to come back. Hearing those words made the lady question herself about what exactly she lacks compared to Isabella. While Her Majesty was sharing that her husband did send a ridiculous number of people with her, as he worried so much, Catherine couldn't help but think that she was the one who helped her get around because she was so weak. She even helped her meet new people because she was so shy. Isabella was loved by the Emperor and she had everything. Compared to her, she has nothing. Because of that, she felt so small when she looked at her friend. A few days later, the lady gave birth before the Empress did. But when Isabella came to congratulate her, she collapsed from the sudden pain. Catherine had not recovered at all, but she helped her lie down in her bed. Thankfully, her baby was safely born. However, something happened to Her Majesty. Despite having many doctors and magicians beside her, Isabella never woke up. The people around her at that time ran out of options to revive the Empress while the lady was just watching them. The moment her only friend took her last breath, there were 2 infants with the same hair color in front of her. Because of the jealousy she had for her friend, she did something that no one had noticed. After time passed by again, the lady left her hometown and moved to a secluded village. She was only able to get a new house and survive because of the reward from the experiment. Catherine heard news from the capital from time to time about how the Emperor went mad after hearing of his wife's death, how he slaughtered everyone who failed to save her, and how the princess, who would be loved in place of Isabella, was named Philomel. That made the lady wonder why they didn't give her the name that Isabella wanted and say to the baby in her hand that maybe it was because it was her name, while calling her Alencia. Isabella's child grew up sweeter and kinder than anyone, and she listened to every word the lady told her. The problem was that she was becoming so much like Isabella that she had to face unbearable regret as she grew up. Because of that, she suffered from nightmares, hallucinations, and insomnia every day. There was a time when the child asked what happened inside their house after hearing the loud noise of a broken glass. Catherine told her it was nothing, but the young Alencia saw the broken vase on the floor. When she asked about it, the lady yelled at her. She told her again that nothing had happened, which surprised the kid after seeing her face like that. After that, Catherine said that she didn't know anything and didn't want to see her face at that moment, so she told the kid to leave. However, she was surprised when Alencia agreed to her, but she would pick up the broken pieces before she went. Otherwise, she might get hurt. The little girl even said that she didn't mind if the lady hated her, but she didn't want her to get hurt while calling her mother. Alencia shouted that she didn't know what she did to get her mad, but she would try to be better. After hearing those words, Catherine realized that the child in front of her was not Isabella. Her tears started to flow as she knew that Alencia didn't know how to hate people and was infinitely sweet. When the kid started to get worried seeing her mother crying like that, Catherine thought that she didn't deserve a daughter as good as her. After that, she apologized to the young girl for being mean to her, as it was all her fault. The lady then hugged Alencia tightly and questioned herself if a piece of trash like her could ever make amends to her, even though she was beyond saving. She kept apologizing to her, so the little kid told her mother that she was fine, so she asked Catherine to stop crying. However, when Isabella's child grew up as a lady, something had changed. There was even a time when Alencia asked for her name as if she didn't know her. Just remembering those cold eyes of the kid she raised by herself sends chills down her body. She then came back to her senses and wondered how much time had passed already. She suddenly remembered that while thinking about the past, something was strange about Alencia that day. After that, she did things that she never used to do. Catherine stopped herself, as there was no point in thinking about it anymore since she was going to die soon. She then thought that if she had one regret, it was Philomel. She assumed that she had a happy life in the palace, so she wondered what could have happened to her while growing up. Suddenly, Catherine was interrupted in her thoughts as she heard footsteps coming in. She immediately got up and asked the person if she was Alencia, the daughter she raised. However, she was surprised to see who it really was, as she didn't expect that visit from that person. It was Philomel who arrived and apologized to Catherine, as she was not the person she was expecting. As the two faced each other, a silence filled the air as it suddenly became awkward. The lady came to see if something had changed because her actions pulled the future forward, but she couldn't believe the first thing she heard from her was the name, Ellen. That made Philomel guess that she could never be that woman's daughter. When Catherine came to her senses and realized that it was not Alencia, she suddenly lifted her hand to touch the lady's face. She then asked if Philomel was captured as well and wanted to know if she was hurt anywhere. Without even answering that woman, as the lady felt chills all over her, Catherine said she was relieved that she came and even asked Phil to come closer so she could see her face. Her sudden action made the lady slap her hand and tell Catherine that she didn't need to pretend that she was worried about her now, which surprised the woman. However, she explained that she had got it all wrong, as she didn't even know Philomel had returned, and she didn't think there was anyone who would come to see her besides Alencia. After hearing all of that, the lady tried to calm herself down, as it was not like her to be that emotional. She thought that she didn't know what that feeling was, and it felt like nothing mattered anymore to her. Catherine then stated that all she could say was how sorry she was, for she had committed a sin that she couldn't wash away even if she begged for the rest of her life. Before saying anything, Philomel knew that she was probably still alive because of Alencia's pleading. She told her that she was glad she had earned some time to reflect. Since her daughter gave Catherine that time, the lady hopes she makes it worthwhile. When the woman heard that, she tried to stop her for a moment, but Philomel continued to say that she was going to leave that place and live quietly where she didn't know anyone. That was why she came there to bid her a final farewell before she rests in peace. In her mind, she was saying goodbye to the one who gave birth to her but could never be her mother. However, before Philomel could even leave that place, Catherine shouted at her to wait for a moment. She begged the lady to stay there with her for a little longer, which halted her from walking. Phil thought that after all that time, she questioned herself as to what she wanted from her. When Catherine begged again, the lady couldn't take it anymore and asked her why she would do that. She then asked again if she wanted her to inform her about Alencia because she was worried. Without even waiting for her answer, Philomel stated that Alencia was doing fine and that she plays dice with her father. She even added that her mother's nanny takes good care of her, and she lives in a palace that is incomparable to that shabby house. The lady continued that she was enjoying what she should have had in the first place, and she would continue to do so. She stops suddenly as she thinks of something. It made her wonder why Alencia had not come there yet, and on top of that, it didn't seem like she had been worried about her mother at all. Then she got distracted with her thoughts when Catherine stated that she was mistaken if she thought she wanted to hear about Ellen. But what caught Philomel's attention was when her birth mother asked if Alencia was acting the same as usual. However, that question was not possible for her to answer, as she didn't know how Alencia usually was. Because of that, Catherine then just asked the lady if she appeared normal because the Ellen she knew had changed. Philomel wanted to know what she was saying, so she explained that she had been acting strangely for a few months. She was not the Alencia she knew, and the way she talked and even walked was different. Aside from that, her new appetite also makes her seem like a different person. Suddenly, Catherine stopped as she realized she shouldn't say that in front of Phil. She then took back her words as she just misspoke, since there was no way Alencia would be a different person. The woman even reasoned that something was wrong with her mind from being locked up there for so long. However, Philomel couldn't get it out of her head and noticed that Catherine seemed to be afraid of something. Her birth mother, who was just begging her earlier to stay, was now letting her go. She even apologized to the lady for keeping her there and told her to leave already, as they might think she was conspiring with her if she got caught down there. Before leaving, Catherine smiled and thanked Philomel for coming to see her one last time. On the other hand, the lady was just staring at her, surprised at the sudden change in her expression. After visiting her birth mother in prison, Philomel questioned whether she could trust Catherine's words, but she also thought that she gained nothing from lying to her. While she was busy thinking whether she was being too skeptical, the lady didn't notice that the cat was staring at her. She thought that even the Book of Prophecy said that Catherine's nature was not wicked. Philomel didn't know what she was doing at that moment, as it didn't even matter to her if they were blood-related. Looking at her actions objectively, it didn't make sense for her to trust Catherine, as everyone knows that Alencia was kind compared to her. Suddenly, the word "everyone knows" made the lady think of something. She wondered why everyone thought that she was kind when she just recently arrived at the imperial palace. Philomel questioned whether it was what the book says. When she thought about it, a few things came into question. Unlike most books of prophecy, that one was written as a novel from Alencia's perspective. Not only that, but it was also in the garden as if someone wanted it to be found. When the stories in the book that couldn't be burned were happening in reality, her younger self had no choice but to rely on it without time to think. Because of that, Philomel wondered if she could fully trust what was written in Alencia, the imperial princess. But Philomel thought that everything that was described in it had come true, including the fact that she was not the emperor's real daughter and that she was born out of a magic tower experiment. Still, she felt like there was something out of place. If that book was not actually a book of prophecy, it made her question what she had been doing all along. The lady then got up, as she had to find out the answer to that, but she needed to get that book first. She thought that it was probably still at the inn in Angelium. Philomel knew she would probably be watched, but if she accepted the term to stay there for 3 months, the emperor would let her go there for at least a short while. The lady was so busy thinking that her vision was getting blurry again that she was about to pass out. But before it could happen, the magic tower suddenly appeared and assisted her back, while asking if she was all right. That surprised Philomel, as she didn't expect him to be there, and inside the imperial palace at that, where a barrier was installed. On the other hand, Legwin was just smiling at the lady, as he was happy to finally meet his daughter again. Meanwhile, a group of mages, together with a nobleman, had finally arrived at the imperial palace. It turns out it was Philomel's half-brothers. Lection told the young man that they needed to split up there, as they all had different things to do. The one they were with was Lord Nassar, who thanked the mages for bringing him along, even though it had been difficult with so many people. He then told them that he would like to repay them, so he wanted to know their names. The red-haired one said that he was Lection, and the brown-haired guy was Cadden. But the silver-haired one didn't say anything, so Nassar turned to look at him to ask him again. Instead of telling his name, he just told the young lord that he didn't need to know, as they wouldn't see each other again anyway. When Nassar heard that, he said that he didn't have to be that humble, which made Lection laugh secretly. The silver-haired guy whispered that he didn't like him, to which Lection commented that he didn't have to worry about Lord Nassar anymore, as they only helped him because they were going to the same place. When Lection stated that they would be going already, the young lord hoped to see them again. After they left, Nassar looked at the building and thought that it was lucky that they met magicians who could teleport as soon as they got to the magic tower. They got there quickly thanks to those mages, but he wondered if Princess Philomel was all right. Now that he had gotten there, the real problem he had was that he had entered the palace without permission. Since he had no choice, the young lord had to return home for now before meeting the lady. However, his mind was filled with worries for Philomel, and he hoped that she was doing well. For the time being, I'll end this here. Did you enjoy the manhwa? If so, then check back for the next part. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for more.